Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Amanda Anderson. Amanda Anderson was born on October 10, 1990, in Fridley, Minnesota, to Mark and Stacy Kennedy Anderson. Amanda lived with her family in New Chapel Hill, about 100 miles from Dallas. It's a small city with a population of less than 1,000 people. She grew up to be a bright and ambitious young woman, graduating with honors from the Tyler Gospel Chapel School in 2009. Amanda is an employee of Trinity Mother Frances and a student at Tyler Junior College, majoring in English literature. She was an aspiring writer, a lover of words, music, and life. But on September 15, 2010, Amanda's family had to face frightening events. Amanda's lifeless body was discovered at her family's home in New Chapel Hill. She was found by her 15-year-old brother, Nate Anderson. Nate had just returned home from a jog in the woods. He called 911 and explained the situation to the police. Nate said he went out for a run because he was stressed about homework. When he came back, he found the door to the house open, which was very unusual. He first checked his room, then Amanda's room, and that's when he saw his sister lying on the floor, unresponsive. The police asked Nate to clarify which door was open, and he explained that people usually entered the house through the garage door. Nate was very emotional, and the police tried to calm him down. When asked if he touched anything in the house, Nate replied that he did not. During the 911 call, Nate told the police that he had discovered the body of his sister Amanda. When asked if Amanda had been shot, Nate replied that she had multiple bullet holes in her head. When the police arrived on the scene, Nate told the same story. Further investigation by a criminologist revealed that Amanda had been sitting up in bed when she was shot, then she fell to the floor. Notably, there was no sign of a gun or shell casing at the crime scene, suggesting that the perpetrator may have taken the weapon with him when he left. Or may have used a revolver, which does not fire a shell casing. Amanda's parents were devastated and could not understand what had led to this tragic event. Being deeply religious people, they found it difficult to understand who could be capable of such a heinous act. Their daughter had just graduated from high school and was a kind person who did not want to harm others and had no enemies. Police began canvassing the neighborhood where the crime occurred to gather more information about Amanda and her family. In interviews, a nearby resident said that Amanda Anderson's family was happy and very religious. A neighbor offered a possible explanation for Amanda's death. He said that the area was generally quiet and low crime, but that about 2 weeks before Amanda died, a nearby home had been robbed. It was possible that the perpetrator of that robbery was also involved in Amanda's death. Perhaps the perpetrator saw Nate Anderson out for a run, broke into the home, and then shot Amanda when she discovered them. To explore this theory, police needed to find evidence to determine whether a botched robbery led to Amanda's death. When the police asked the family to check for any missing valuables, Amanda's father, Mark, thoroughly searched the house and confirmed that nothing had been taken. Although there were valuables such as jewelry and a laptop in Amanda's room, nothing was missing. Amanda's father, Mark, thoroughly searched the house and confirmed that nothing had been taken. This surprising discovery made the police question the motive behind the crime. If the intention of the criminals was to steal, why did they shoot Amanda multiple times after seeing her? The lack of stolen items proved that this was not a robbery. The police began to look into other motives. The forensic team searched the entire house, not just Amanda's room, for evidence. They collected fingerprints and hair, hoping to find samples left by someone outside the household. Additional evidence was collected from Nate, the person who first discovered Amanda's body. His clothing was taken to be examined for potential connections to the crime scene. Initially, Nate's clothing did not appear to be important to the police investigation because it did not contain any visible blood. However, as part of standard procedure to rule out family members as potential suspects, police sent Nate's clothing to a lab for further analysis, along with other collected evidence. Meanwhile, the police asked Mark Anderson, Amanda's father, to reveal the location of all the firearms in the house. As it turned out, the Andersons possessed an extensive collection of guns, which was not unusual for a family in Texas. They didn't actively hunt but occasionally practiced shooting. Following Mark's lead, the police discovered weapons and seized more than 10 different types of pistols and rifles, as well as several revolvers. Their informants also did not provide any clues, leaving the police without a clear lead. The police did not have many clues to identify the culprit. On September 17, 2010, the police obtained the autopsy results 2 days after Amanda's death. The report revealed that Amanda had been shot 4 times, all in the head. What's striking is that any one of these shots would have been fatal, yet the perpetrator fired 3 additional times. The bullet wounds locations on Amanda's head were also peculiar. The shots were fired from a small caliber pistol. 2 wounds were located on the top of her head, one near the right temple, and the last one on her forehead. Except for the shot to the right temple, which was fired at a 90-degree angle, all shots were directed from top to bottom. The nature of these wounds suggests that Amanda's death was more like an execution. The crime scene revealed that .22 caliber bullets were used in the shooting. The lack of gunpowder marks around Amanda's head wounds suggested the shooter was at least a yard away. Based on forensic evidence, police concluded that Amanda knew her killer. 2 key factors led to this conclusion. Amanda was sitting on her bed, working on her laptop, when she was shot, and the shooter was standing beside her. It's likely that if a stranger had entered her room, Amanda would have reacted defensively. However, she took no action, indicating she was familiar with the shooter and didn't perceive them as a threat. The police sought to identify the killer among Amanda's acquaintances by questioning her friends at college. Her best friend revealed that Amanda was cautious and didn't engage with strangers or use unknown substances. Amanda was not involved in any illegal activities. She also had no enemies at college. However, it is possible that someone was secretly following Amanda and planning an attack. In an attempt to find leads, police spoke with college security about any suspicious incidents related to Amanda or other students over the past year. Unfortunately, this did not yield any results. A week after Amanda's death, police have found no leads and have not identified any suspects. Amanda's family grieves, and they are desperate for answers about what happened. In an effort to gather more information, a reward was offered to anyone who could provide helpful leads to the investigation. The goal was to encourage someone with valuable information to come forward. The police station soon received numerous calls with tips, but most of them were unsubstantiated assumptions that only hindered the investigation. Despite the time-consuming process of verifying each lead, none of them yielded the desired outcome. Ultimately, every tip led to a dead end. The police decided to re-question the Amanda family, focusing on Amanda's personal life, as the nature and number of her wounds suggested a personal motive. Amanda's mother was baffled by the crime, describing her daughter as a devout churchgoer and excellent student who was kind to everyone. She revealed that Amanda did not have a boyfriend at the time of her death, but had been dating a friend her age for about a year. However, the relationship had ended, and as far as her mother knew, they had not seen each other since. Police were looking for Amanda's ex-boyfriend to investigate the nature of their relationship and determine whether he had any ulterior motive for harming her. Amanda's ex-boyfriend reported that he and Amanda attended some classes and occasionally went to the movies with friends, but they never dated. They spent time together on a few occasions, however, their interactions were normal. When asked about his last encounter with Amanda, he said that he saw her the day before she died. According to him, she was on her way to pick up Nate from church. This information was not valuable. Therefore, the police decided to review the case from the beginning. the police started with Nate's 911 call. During the conversation, Nate mentioned that he did not go into his sister's room and said that someone had shot Amanda. When asked if Amanda had suffered a gunshot wound, Nate replied that there was more than one wound, specifically mentioning multiple shots to her head. However, when the police arrived at the scene, they did not immediately find evidence of multiple gunshot wounds, despite their experience in such cases. Furthermore, no gun casings or bullet casings were found at the scene. This raised questions about how Nate knew his sister had been shot multiple times. Investigators concluded that it was impossible for anyone standing at the door to know that Amanda had been shot in the head, let alone the exact number of times. The police returned to Amanda's house and inspected the door that Nate said had been propped open when he arrived. Although they found some scratches, the lock showed no signs of damage. This suggested that the scene may have been staged. After the crime lab examined the weapons seized from the home, the officers believed that a .22 caliber handgun may have been used to shoot Amanda. Analyzing all the available information, the officers came to a shocking conclusion. It appeared that Amanda had died at the hands of a family member. The pistol had been hidden in a safe place, and the killer knew where it was. Furthermore, the person who shot Amanda later returned the gun to its original location. Amanda's parents were not home on the night of the murder. Her father was having dinner with a friend, and her mother was at work. Only Amanda and her 15-year-old brother, Nate, were home. Therefore, all the initial evidence pointed to Nate as the prime suspect. However, the police did not understand the motive behind the crime, especially why Nate used their father's gun to harm his sister. To gain a better understanding of the events, the police took a closer look at what happened that evening. According to Mark Anderson, he had called his daughter to remind her to pick up her mother from work. 12 minutes later, Mark received the call from Nate, who was crying and claimed that someone had shot him. What the police found surprising was that Nate had called his father before dialing 911. The police needed concrete evidence before they could file any charges. Their goal was to avoid causing further heartache to Amanda and Nate's parents. The police decided to speak with Mark Anderson without directly accusing their son. However, Nate's parents soon realized that the police suspected their son. In an effort to gather more information, the police asked Mark if Nate had recently used a .22 caliber pistol. Mark revealed that he had given the pistol to Nate a few days before Amanda's death, after which Nate had used it in the backyard for shooting practice. A subsequent search of Amanda's home led the police to the discovery of several .22 caliber shell casings in the backyard. While these casings matched the bullets found in Amanda's body, it was still possible that this was just a coincidence. More evidence was needed to establish a definitive connection. However, 2 weeks after Amanda's death, Nate's clothes, which he had been wearing when he found his sister dead, were sent to a lab for testing with luminol. The chemical reaction showed traces of blood on his clothes. A blood spatter expert concluded that Nate Anderson had either been in the room when the shooting occurred or that he had fired the fatal shots. Tests confirmed that Nate's clothes had his sister's blood on them. This raised many questions, as Nate and Amanda were known to be close and affectionate siblings. Their parents described their relationship as loving, and family photos showed the siblings getting along well. On November 10, 2010, police got a warrant for Nate Anderson. They found him in the church and arrested him for murder. Everyone familiar with the case was shocked. No one could believe that Nate would do such a thing. The trial began on October 24, 2011. It was a long and emotional road for many, especially Amanda's family. Despite the evidence against the young teen, family members vowed to stand by Nate. Nate's grandmother said that Nate knew nothing but church, school, and love, and that Nate would never hurt his sister for any reason in the world. Amanda's parents struggled to accept that their son was responsible for Amanda's death. Nate was tried as an adult. An examiner for Nate said it would be best for him to remain in juvenile court, but the judge disagreed. For the first time, the state revealed some of the evidence police found in Amanda's home after Amanda's death. Prosecutors claimed that Nate's computer showed a history of repeated visits to adult websites and drawings of violent scenes. Additionally, one of the text messages on Amanda's phone said Nate should be shot. Her friend asked, "For what?" She replied, "For putting big staples in Amanda's head and never helping around the house." Nate Anderson eventually pleaded guilty to a first-degree crime in February 2012 as part of a plea deal. Prior to his guilty plea, Nate confessed to a psychologist and then to his parents that he was responsible for Amanda's death. According to a statement released by the parents, Nate told them that he shot Amanda with a handgun found in their home. Mark Anderson, Nate's father, stated that Nate begged for forgiveness, which he granted. Stacy, Nate's mother, expressed the pain she faced. Was a loving mother to both of her children. As a result of the plea agreement, Nate was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. His attorney believed that entering into a plea agreement was in Nate's best interests, as neither Nate nor his family wanted the case to go to trial. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Lauren Heike. Lauren Heike was born on November 20, 1993, in Seattle, Washington, to a well-off family. Her father, Jeff, owned a plumbing manufacturing business, and her mother, Lana, worked in real estate. Lauren was close to her older brother, Ryan. She attended Central Kitsap High School in Silverdale, Washington. After graduating, Lauren moved to Phoenix and enrolled at the Gary Manuel Lita Institute to study cosmetology and skin care. Lauren took great care of herself and had a good understanding of cosmetics. Lauren started her career at 18 years old and achieved significant success. She initially spent 5 years, from 2015 onwards, working as a customer support representative. She then became a leading manager at Benefit, a renowned cosmetics company. Next, she worked as a cosmetologist at a beauty salon for 9 months. In October 2020, Lauren got a job as a manager at an aesthetic medicine center. Additionally, she had aspirations to pursue a career in real estate, following in her mother's footsteps. At the time of the tragedy, Lauren was working full-time as an instructor at a golf club. Lauren was a confident and responsible individual who thrived in multiple areas, including the beauty industry, sports, and real estate. She made her physical health a top priority and led a healthy, active lifestyle. With a strong support system of friends and family, which allowed her to make the most of her leisure time by doing things she loved, such as traveling, going on hikes, and spending time with others. One of her favorite pastimes was walking alone, immersed in music and nature, savoring the fresh air, silence, and tranquility. Her preferred route was a secluded path in the northern part of Phoenix, close to her apartment. Lauren's parents worried about her walking alone in empty areas, but she felt sure she was safe. Lauren began each day with a consistent routine, waking up, drinking coffee, chatting with loved ones and friends, and embarking on her daily walk. She believes these things help her start her day on a positive note. However, Lauren has no idea that her gullible and carefree nature will put her in danger. On April 28, 2023, Lauren started her morning routine as usual. She had coffee, chatted with family and friends on the phone, and went for a walk in a quiet area near her apartment in northern Phoenix. The scenic trail took around 15 to 30 minutes to walk one way. Lauren left her apartment at around 10:30 a.m. Surveillance cameras last captured her walking calmly on the trail at 10:52 a.m., wearing a pink sports top, black leggings, and sneakers, with only her phone and keys on her. After that, she was not seen again. Lauren was expected at work at 11:30 a.m. but failed to show up, which was unusual for someone so responsible. Her colleagues tried calling her, but her phone was turned off. This worried Lauren's friends, who shared messages on social media and called each other to find information about Lauren's location. However, no one had any news, and Lauren had not been seen after leaving her apartment that morning. At about 1 p.m., Lauren's worried parents went to her apartment because they couldn't get in touch with her. They thought maybe she wasn't feeling well and that's why she didn't go to work. But Lauren wasn't there either. All her belongings were still in place, the doors were locked, and nothing suggested there had been a break-in or a struggle. It looked like she had gone out for a walk and just hadn't come back. After that, Lauren's relatives immediately filed a missing person report with the police. The authorities reacted swiftly and initiated a search, but unfortunately, they did not get any results. The park where Lauren went for a walk was almost deserted. If someone had been passing by when the attack occurred, the tragedy might have been prevented. However, that was not the case. Lauren was last seen walking alone towards the park, and then she disappeared, no longer responding to calls. Throughout the day, the police and volunteers thoroughly searched the surrounding area, the park, and looked for potential witnesses. They meticulously combed every corner and every bush but found nothing. Lauren's loved ones held on to the hope that she might have simply wandered off, got delayed, or visited friends in another part of the city. Lauren's relatives kept calling and texting her, but still didn't know where she was. As the hours passed, their hopes dwindled, and their fear for Lauren's life grew. Her parents, brother, and friends were beside themselves with worry. The following morning, April 29th, was like a terrible nightmare. At around 11 o'clock, the worst happened. A woman walking her dog stumbled upon Lauren's body. She recognized Lauren because she often walked her dog on that route and had seen Lauren before. The dog sensed something was wrong, and the woman saw Lauren's bloody body. She immediately called the police. Police arrived instantly at the scene to a horrific sight. Lauren's body was found 3 meters off the trail, concealed in a thicket with numerous stab wounds. She lay face up with outstretched arms, her clothes torn, and blood was everywhere. Experts began working immediately, with the forensic medical examiner determining that Lauren died on April 28 at approximately 11 a.m. due to blood loss from deep knife wounds. A total of 15 stab wounds were found on Lauren's body, likely inflicted with a pocket knife. The wound in her back area was fatal. The nature of the wounds indicated that the attack and murder lasted for some time, as they were in different parts of her body, varying in depth and shape. The injuries on Lauren's hands showed she had resisted, with deep cuts on both sides of her hands from trying to deflect the sharp knife. Police realized Lauren fought to the end, but her attacker was aggressive and strong. The attack was unexpected, and scratches on her back, shoulders, and torn clothing indicated the suspect attacked from behind, knocking her down and stabbing her with a knife. He then turned her over and continued to strike. At the crime scene, investigators found a clear footprint from a size 42 to 43 sneaker, likely belonging to the attacker. The area showed signs of a struggle, with Lauren attempting to crawl away and hide in nearby bushes. However, she was unable to escape, and bloodstains were found stretching several meters from the scene, ending near her body. It appeared that Lauren fought for her life and called for help, but unfortunately, she was alone in the deserted park at that early hour with no one nearby to assist her. Near the body, a barbed wire fence was discovered, which Lauren seemed to have desperately tried to climb over. Torn clothing and blood were found on the wire, suggesting that her attempt to overcome the fence resulted in the numerous scratches and abrasions on her body. Lauren's phone and house keys were found nearby, having fallen from her pockets during the struggle. Her phone was broken, with the last calls made on the evening of April 27th, indicating that no one had heard from her for over a day. Further examination of the area revealed a bloody pocket knife among the branches a few meters from the crime scene, providing another crucial piece of evidence. Experts quickly identified the object as the likely murder weapon. Further analysis of the blade and handle uncovered fingerprints and DNA traces from an unidentified male. Investigators also collected hair and skin cells from the killer at the crime scene. Lauren's body, along with all physical evidence, was promptly sent for forensic examination. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed the surveillance camera footage from the park. They found that one camera captured Lauren entering the park at 10:52, walking alone and listening to music on her headphones, without anything seeming out of the ordinary. However, just 1 minute later, a tall, thin man in dark clothing appeared on the recording, quickly passing by the camera as if attempting to conceal his face. Despite the man's efforts to hide, experts were able to make out that he was a young African-American male wearing a cap. Notably, his height, build, skin color, and clothing matched the description of the individual whose traces were discovered at the crime scene. Another camera, positioned at the park exit, recorded the same man rushing out from around the corner at 10:59, looking around frantically. He then tried to climb over the fence but got his clothes caught, ultimately jumping over and losing his cap in the process. The investigation gained its first lead from records showing the suspect disappearing in an unknown direction. Although the perpetrator's identity couldn't be immediately established, the police now had an accurate description and distinguishing features to work with. Notably, the unknown man appeared in the park around the same time Lauren was murdered, according to preliminary findings. The cameras captured footage of the killer before and after the crime. A detailed analysis of the footage revealed more information. The suspect moved with purpose, glancing around as if fearful of being seen. He appeared in the park about 30 to 40 seconds after Lauren did, suggesting he was following her. After committing the crime, the perpetrator fled the scene in the opposite direction of the park entrance, scaling a fence to escape quickly. This behavior supports the theory that the murder was premeditated and possibly not his first offense. The killer acted swiftly and boldly, attempting to avoid leaving evidence behind. However, in their haste, they made mistakes that allowed them to be partially captured on camera. Despite being shown footage from the cameras, Lauren's parents and friends were unable to identify the man in the video. The tragedy left everyone shocked and deeply saddened. Lauren's loved ones don't understand why someone could so cruelly take the life-kind and energetic girl. Lauren had no enemies, was not involved in any conflicts, and did not owe anyone money. Additionally, she did not own anything that was worth a significant amount. Her lifestyle is extremely healthy. As a result, the possibilities of revenge or robbery were quickly ruled out. A week after the murder, a press conference was held where police officers shared the evidence they had gathered and appealed to the public for help in identifying the suspect. Lauren's father, clearly distraught, pleaded with anyone who had information to come forward help and assist law enforcement. In response, Lauren's relatives offered a substantial reward for any information that could help identify the killer. The case sent shockwaves throughout the city, prompting thousands of people to take action by sharing information on social media, organizing search parties, and volunteering. Meanwhile, investigators continued to analyze physical evidence. Forensic experts carefully examined DNA, fingerprints, and other biological evidence in a laboratory. Eventually, they got a break in the case. The suspect's genetic profile matched a record in the police database, which identified Zion William Teasley, a 22-year-old African-American with a history of crime. Detectives promptly began to investigate Teasley's background. Their inquiry revealed that Teasley was raised in a troubled home. His parents struggled with addiction. Teasley had a criminal record from a young age, with offenses including theft, public disorder, and intimidation. In 2020, he was convicted of committing several armed robberies. As a result, Teasley spent almost a year incarcerated, but his sentence was reduced due to positive behavior, allowing him to be released early. Teasley's most recent arrest occurred in January 2023 for a knife attack on a bystander, but the charges were dropped when the victim withdrew their statement, resulting in Teasley receiving a suspended sentence. At the time of Lauren's murder, the suspect was under police supervision, requiring him to regularly report to the precinct. His last check-in occurred on April 27, the day before the tragic incident in the park. Upon learning this, detectives started devising a plan to apprehend Teasley, placing him under 24-hour surveillance. It was discovered that Teasley was unemployed and spent most of his time at home, occasionally visiting the store or meeting with suspicious individuals. Having obtained an arrest warrant, police visited Teasley's apartment, breaking down the door to gain entry. However, they found no one inside. The search uncovered a bucket of chlorine, gloves, and rags, indicating Teasley's likely intention to eliminate evidence. Teasley's room contained a packed suitcase and a new passport in a different name, along with bus tickets to Canada, suggesting a plan to escape the country. The investigation led detectives to believe Teasley was aware of the search and aimed to evade justice. A massive search operation was launched. Information about Teasley was sent to all states, and border agents were instructed to apprehend the suspect. Surveillance systems have been enhanced at railway stations, airports, and highways. By tracking calls from Teasley's phone and analyzing cell tower signals, detectives sought to pinpoint his location. Concurrently, they collected more evidence, including accounts from witnesses who spotted Teasley following Lauren the day before the murder. Another witness stated that they saw him in the same park 2 days prior to the tragic incident. A thorough investigation into Teasley's past revealed a disturbing pattern of violent behavior towards women. Just a month prior to Lauren's murder, he was detained for harassing a woman at a nightclub. Furthermore, a former girlfriend had previously filed a complaint against him for physical abuse, although the case was ultimately dropped due to insufficient evidence. It is clear that Teasley was an extremely unstable and aggressive man with a deep hatred of women, whom he considered inferior. Teasley's social media posts were discovered, where he used derogatory language towards women. Photographs were found featuring knives that bore a striking resemblance to the murder weapon at the scene. Authorities suggested that Lauren may have been a random victim of Teasley's violent tendencies. Lauren's family were shocked and couldn't understand why someone would be so heartless and cruel. Their daughter had simply gone for a walk and was brutally murdered for no reason. Lauren's father made a heartfelt plea to the public, begging them not to seek revenge themselves. He wants people to let the police handle the situation and punish the perpetrators through the law, instead of using mob violence. After a 3-day search, Teasley was apprehended in an abandoned garage on the city's outskirts. During the arrest, he resisted and injured a police officer. During questioning, Teasley was uncooperative, claiming he had committed no crime and had never seen Lauren before. He later denied being in the park that day, but fell silent when shown surveillance footage, and he requested a lawyer. The prosecutor promptly charged Teasley with intentional murder and kidnapping, citing substantial evidence, surveillance videos, Lauren's belongings found in the garage, a knife, DNA, and fingerprints from the crime scene. The court ordered Teasley to be held without bail. Teasley's trial began on June 5, 2023, and was one of the most high-profile cases in state history, drawing widespread national attention. Journalists and members of the public who were concerned about the issue assembled in front of the courthouse. Everyone in the courtroom was to catch a glimpse of the person responsible for the horrific murder. Teasley, the defendant, was led in wearing handcuffs and an orange prison robe, his expression eerily indifferent. In stark contrast, Lauren's family was overcome with heartache. Her mother sobbed uncontrollably, while her father glared at Teasley with anger and hatred. The prosecutor gave a powerful and emotional speech, portraying Teasley as a ruthless killer who posed a significant threat to society. He stressed how brutally the crime was committed and the overwhelming evidence against Teasley. Prosecutors described Teasley as a psychopath who enjoyed inflicting pain on women, driven by a deep-seated hatred for them. Conversely, Teasley's defense attorney sought to prove his client's innocence. He challenged the evidence, arguing that it was possible another individual was responsible for Lauren's death. The defense urged the jury to remain impartial, to focus solely on the facts and not be swayed by public opinion or emotions. Teasley is currently charged with first-degree murder. In December 2023, the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office requested the death penalty, the most severe punishment allowed by Arizona law for such a serious crime. The Phoenix Police Department has completed their investigation, and the suspect will face prosecution. However, Teasley maintains his innocence despite the charges. He remains in custody without bail. The trial is expected to take place in October 2025 and will be one of the most high-profile cases in Arizona history. Lauren's tragic death shocked the nation and devastated her loved ones. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kelly Cochran. Christopher Reagan was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, where he spent his early years. At the age of 20, he decided to serve his country and joined the military. Christopher committed himself to protecting the peace and safety of his fellow citizens. Christopher was stationed at a military base near Marquette, where he met Terry O'Donnell, a young teacher from Iron River. They lived in the same area and would often see each other around town as they spent more time together. They remained close friends for many years, but Christopher eventually decided to leave the military and move to Traverse City. Despite the distance between them, they continued to communicate regularly, and in December 2012, Christopher asked Terry to take their relationship to the next level. Terry and Christopher have known each other for many years. They find they have a lot in common. They decide to live together. Terry and Christopher choose Iron River as the perfect place for them to settle down. Christopher finds a job at a factory that makes parts for military ships, where he becomes a supervisor. However, after 2 years of living together, problems began to arise in their relationship. Unfortunately, they didn't make an effort to work through their issues, and it became clear that their relationship was coming to an end. Eventually, they made the difficult decision to go their separate ways. Despite the breakup, they were able to part on good terms and remain friends. After breaking up with Terry, Christopher realized that he couldn't live in her house anymore, so he decided to rent his own house. He felt that the town he lived in was too small, and he wanted a more dynamic city. Christopher began applying for jobs in various locations, sending out his resume in search of a new job. In October 2014, Christopher found a job in Asheville, North Carolina. As Christopher settled into his new life in Asheville, he contacted Terry on October 14th, telling her that he would be taking the day off tomorrow and looking forward to meeting Terry for a walk. However, on October 15th, Christopher did not contact Terry as planned. Terry became worried and tried calling him for several days, but he did not answer. She even contacted their mutual friends. 10 days after Christopher went missing, Terry filed a police report. The police accepted the report and told Terry that Christopher had probably moved to a new job in North Carolina and that he had started a new life and wanted to contact old friends. To avoid speculation, investigators conducted a thorough investigation. They identified Christopher's new workplace and contacted an employee to gather information. However, surprisingly, they found out that Christopher had not shown up to work in 10 days. The police then suspected that he might have been involved in an accident, given his frequent solo outdoor trips. The search for Christopher led investigators to the local woods, where he was known to frequent. Trained search dogs were brought in to aid in the effort. But no signs of Christopher were found. Terry, concerned that Christopher may have been injured or in an accident, suggested searching his former apartment. The investigators agreed and visited the apartment, where they were met with a scene of disarray. Clothes and belongings were scattered across the floor, and closets were left open. Initially, they thought that Christopher might have simply been messy, but Terry disputed this, stating that Christopher was typically neat and organized. The detectives started to suspect a connection between the recent events and the crime. After investigating Christopher's home, they decided to expand their search. A thorough search of the neighborhood led them to find Christopher's car 8 miles outside Iron River, near the city limits. The police found it unusual that the car was left there, suggesting it might have been abandoned unintentionally. After forcing open a door, they searched the interior and found nothing suspicious, only ordinary clothing. However, one of the officers noticed a small yellow piece of paper on the front passenger seat with a detailed route written on it. They decided to follow the route to see where it led. Although the paper did not specify an exact address, the directions were clear. According to Terry, Christopher, although familiar with the city of Iron River, did not know the local street names, so he wrote down the directions using landmarks such as bus stops and gas stations. Terry deduced from the detailed notes that this was Christopher's first time visiting the location. The detectives followed the route outlined on the paper, which led them to a nearby town and a specific house mentioned in Christopher's notes. When they arrived, they knocked on the door to gather information in Christopher's connection to the location. A man named Jason Cochran answered the door, and his wife Kelly was there. The police explained that they were investigating Christopher's disappearance and had found a lead pointing to this address. Terry, who worked with Christopher at the same factory, revealed that they were co-workers. She had tried to contact Christopher via text message in mid-October but had not received a response. Investigators found a note in Christopher's car that showed the route to Jason's house. Although confused, Jason and Kelly agreed to cooperate with the investigation. After a short interrogation without any further clues, the detectives left Jason Cochran's house. Detectives then interviewed Christopher's co-workers at the factory. A supervisor shared that Christopher had been having an affair with Kelly Cochran, which was an open secret among employees. This revelation sparked interest, leading investigators to re-question the Jason and Kelly. During re-interrogation, Kelly confessed to her relationship with Christopher. However, she claimed that she could not reveal this information earlier because her husband Jason was present. According to Kelly, Jason agreed to her affair. However, Christopher's colleagues disputed Kelly's story. They claimed that Jason did not approve of Kelly's affair. When Jason was later brought in for questioning, he completely denied approving of Kelly's affair. His strong objection to Kelly's infidelity aroused suspicion and made him a suspect. The investigation into Christopher's disappearance was ongoing, but the lack of concrete evidence made it impossible to determine whether Kelly was involved. As a result, Kelly and Jason were released from the police station. The case remained unsolved for 5 months. In March 2015, a new investigator, Detective Jeremy Ogden from the Hobart Police Department, took over the case. Jeremy Ogden began by thoroughly examining the Jason Cochran family's background. Kelly and Jason had met in high school and started living together soon after graduation. They had distinct personalities. Kelly was outgoing, sociable, and talkative, while Jason was quiet and reserved. He rarely initiated conversations, only responding to questions asked of him. Despite their differences, they decided to get married. After the wedding, they started a business together, providing swimming pool maintenance services. The business was modest, but it provided a decent income for they. Jason handled most of the pool maintenance work, but the constant stress and physical strain took a toll on his health. He began to experience back problems and felt increasingly heavier every day. Eventually, he realized he could no longer continue running the business. Kelly then took over the responsibilities of running the business, hoping that Jason would soon recover and return to his duties. However, his condition continued to worsen, and medical treatments were not providing the desired relief. Kelly searched for alternative ways to help her husband recover. During her search, Kelly discovered a plant that offered hope for Jason's recovery. However, the plant was banned in their home state, making it inaccessible to them. To access the treatment, Kelly and Jason decided to relocate to Michigan, specifically Iron River Township, in 2014. Jason consulted his doctor and received a prescription for pain medication. Around the same time, in early 2014, Jason's wife, Kelly Cochran, started working at a factory that manufactured parts for U.S. warships. Kelly and Jason moved to the area. Kelly and Jason worked at the same factory where Christopher Reagan worked. Christopher and Kelly found common topics of conversation and over time became close friends. This friendship was especially important to Christopher. After gathering evidence, prosecutors presented their case to a Michigan judge to obtain a search warrant for Kelly and Jason's home. The judge granted the warrant, and on March 6, a team of investigators searched Kelly and Jason's home, carefully searching for any evidence related to Christopher's disappearance. The only significant discovery was a book written by Jason. He used a pseudonym in the world of video games. The title of the work was ordinary, but its content was horrifying. In this dark and violent book, Jason described the murder of the person who had harmed him. After reading the book, the detectives noticed a character who bore an uncanny resemblance to Christopher. This raised suspicions about Jason, leading them to wonder if he had been inspired by the real-life crimes he had committed. 3 weeks later, a second search of Jason's home was conducted. The police hoped to find crucial evidence that had been missed in the first search. However, when they arrived at the Jason's home, they found it empty, with no cars in sight. Repeated attempts to knock on the door went unanswered. It was later discovered that Kelly and Jason had fled the state shortly after the initial search, moving to Indiana. Their sudden departure left investigators concerned. Michigan police, needing a DNA sample, asked Indiana police for help. Indiana police went to Jason's new home, where they had just moved. The investigation into Christopher Reagan's disappearance ran out of clues. Time passed, and on February 22, 2016, Hobart, Indiana, police received a frantic call from Kelly Cochran, who tried to explain that her husband, Jason, was not breathing. When paramedics arrived, Kelly was in a panic. It was clear that Jason was beyond saving. He was sitting in a chair, his face burning like fire, as if he had overheated. The doctors officially confirmed Jason's death. His body was then sent for a thorough forensic examination. Meanwhile, Kelly was handed over to a police patrol and taken to relatives who lived nearby. To piece together what happened, investigators thoroughly searched the Jason's new home. During the search, a police officer found a syringe at the foot of Jason in his wife's bed. Initially, investigators believed Jason's death was due to substance abuse. The medical examiner's report showed that Jason had multiple drugs in his system, but Jason's death was due to strangulation, confirmed by bruises on his neck and face. The focus of the investigation then shifted to Kelly Cochran, who appeared to be connected to both crimes. She was now considered the prime suspect in not only Christopher's disappearance but also her husband's murder. On February 23, 2016, Kelly Cochran was summoned to the police station to answer questions about her husband's death. Under direct questioning and pressure from investigators, Kelly denied any involvement in her husband's death and Christopher's disappearance. She claimed that Jason's death was due to a drug overdose. Months later, investigators still lacked concrete evidence to convict Kelly. During the investigation, Detective Jeremy Ogden met Walter Hammerman, a close friend of Jason's. Kelly informed Walter of Jason's death, who then contacted the police. Walter shared his insights with investigators, saying he did not believe Jason's death was caused by drugs. He claimed that Jason had used herbs to relieve his chronic back pain. In March of the previous year, Jason confided in Walter about his concerns. Jason and Kelly were asked to go to Indiana because the Iron River police suspected them of being involved in Christopher's disappearance. This had a significant impact on Jason, leading to depression. Walter observed the notable change in Jason's behavior, with Kelly increasingly taking control over his life. Jason appeared to be constantly anxious, and he began to avoid social gatherings as soon as Kelly returned from work. As the investigation progressed, this information became a vital link. After the medical examiner determined that Jason had died from strangulation, Detective Ogden devised a plan to pressure Kelly into revealing the truth about Jason's death. Walter, Jason's friend, was used as bait to lure Kelly into a trap. On March 12, 2016, Walter, under police surveillance and equipped with a listening device, called Kelly. He told her that Jason had given him a letter containing important information before his death, with the condition that it be sent to the police if anything happened to him. However, Kelly surprisingly asked Walter to drop the idea, which caught both Walter and the police off guard. Despite this development, the detective still lacked direct evidence to build a case. In the weeks following her initial questioning, Kelly was subjected to multiple interrogations by investigators trying to uncover the truth. Despite their efforts, she continued to deny any wrongdoing. However, on April 26, 2016, it became apparent that Kelly Cochran had evaded the scrutiny of investigators and was on the loose. Detectives joined forces with police officers from Iron River and Hobart to launch a federal manhunt for Kelly Cochran. Walter Hammerman, who had cooperated with the police, was shocked and frightened by the news. He feared that Kelly might never be caught and could potentially harm him again. As the search for Kelly intensified, her phone went off, leading investigators to believe she was deliberately concealing her location. Kelly evaded police and fled to Wingo, Kentucky, over 6 hours away from Hobart. A detective notified the local authorities to exercise extreme caution if they found Kelly. Police in Wingo identified Kelly at her cousin's house on April 28. Understanding that she posed a potential danger and was prone to attempting to escape, officers rapidly proceeded to the residence, avoiding advance warnings that afternoon and detaining Kelly on site. During the interview, Kelly revealed new details. That Kelly was deeply in love with Jason and wanted to leave the city life behind to start over with him. On October 13, 2015, Jason discovered Kelly's infidelity. Jason made a dark pact. The adulterer was obliged to kill his lover if the affair was exposed. Kelly claimed she had never taken this pact seriously, thinking it was just a joke. However, Jason was resolute and warned Kelly that if she didn't fulfill her end of the bargain, he would take matters into his own hands. Despite her reservations, Kelly reluctantly helped Jason commit a heinous crime. The next evening, October 14, 2015, Christopher arrived at Kelly's house, eager to spend a romantic evening with Christopher while her husband was away. Kelly had planned a fun evening, complete with dinner and intimacy. Kelly and Christopher had dinner together and then went upstairs to the house. Then Jason suddenly appeared. Jason rushed into the bedroom, holding a rifle. Christopher immediately realized that he was in danger. Without hesitation, Jason shot Christopher in the head, killing him. Jason and Kelly then dragged the body down to the basement, where they began to dismember it with a hacksaw. Jason and Kelly cut Christopher's limbs and head off his body and placed the remains in several garbage bags. They then dumped the bags in the woods near Crystal Falls. To avoid suspicion, they drove Christopher's car away from the house. Kelly and Jason thoroughly cleaned the house to remove any evidence of the crime. Kelly was consumed by a deep-seated anger towards her husband, whom she blamed for ruining her chance at happiness with he she truly loved, Christopher. She couldn't forgive her husband for depriving her of the opportunity to be with him, and the pain and loss she felt lingered every day. Kelly's resentment towards her husband eventually turned to hatred, and she knew she could no longer live peacefully with him. An opportunity for revenge presented itself on February 22, 2016, when her husband complained of back pain. Kelly convinced him to let her give her an injection, but she deliberately gave him a dose that killed him. However, the medication didn't work as planned, and her husband was still breathing. Kelly then suffocated him by covering his mouth and nose with her hands. To ensure he was dead, she also squeezed his neck, which explained the bruises found on his body. After confessing to the crime, Kelly cooperated with the police to help them locate Christopher's remains. On May 18, 2016, Detective Jeremy Ogden led a team to a remote area near Crystal Falls to search for Christopher's body. A canine unit picked up the scent and led the team to a small hill, where they found a human skull with bullet holes, indicating a homicide. The team believed they had discovered Christopher's remains. Further examination of the scene yielded additional evidence, including a .22 caliber bullet, a broken firearm. Dental records later confirmed the victim's identity. This breakthrough finally solved the case that had haunted investigators for 2 years. Kelly Cochran was formally charged with the murders of Christopher and Jason Cochran in April 2016. On February 13, 2017, Kelly was brought to court in Michigan to face charges. The prosecutor argued that Kelly was the mastermind behind the crime and that she had planned and executed. The prosecution presented strong evidence, including Kelly's own confession, to support their case. However, Kelly told a different story. She claimed that her husband, Jason, was the one who had planned and committed the crime. According to Kelly, Jason was jealous and had been abusing her. On the day of the crime, Jason allegedly hid in the basement and surprised Kelly and Christopher, then shot Christopher in a fit of rage. Kelly also claimed that Jason had forced her to help him dismember the body by threatening to harm her. Despite Kelly's new version of events, the jury found her guilty of premeditated murder after deliberating for 3 hours. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After being sentenced, Kelly Cochran was sent directly to Crown Point Correctional Facility in Ionia, Michigan, where she is currently serving her sentence. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Anna Delvey. Anna Sorokin was born on January 23, 1991 in Domodedovo, a city south of Moscow, Russia. Her father was a truck driver and her mother ran a small shop. In 2007, when she was 16, Anna and her family moved to Germany. Her father became a manager of a transport company, but the company went bankrupt in 2013. He then worked in the heating and cooling industry. During this time, Anna's mother took care of the family. Anna attended a Catholic school. Anna is reserved and modest. She also had difficulty learning German. In 2010, Anna began studying at an art and design college, but Anna dropped out in 2013. At the age of 22, she moved to Paris and started a new life. In Paris, Anna interned at a French fashion magazine and began using the name Anna Delvey. She claimed that Delvey was her mother's maiden name, but it was not. In Paris, Anna attended various fashion events and social gatherings. Her parents supported Anna financially as much as they could, and Anna always reassured them that investing in her future was a wise decision. In 2016, Anna moved to New York. Thanks to her relationship with Oliver Zam, the editor-in-chief of the French magazine where she interned. Anna was a regular at high-class social events. Anna met the rich and famous at these gatherings. At these events, Anna introduced herself as Anna Delvey, a wealthy heiress from Germany. She claimed to have a fortune of 60 million euros in Swiss bank accounts. Many people are still speculating about Anna's father's true occupation. Some people thought he was a diplomat, others thought he owned an oil company, and some of Anna's acquaintances believed his work was related to the antiques trade. While in New York, Anna befriended the famous art collector Michael Söffelhang. Michael shared with her his dream of opening a private art museum. When Michael told her about his plans to attend an art exhibition in Venice, Italy, Anna expressed her desire to join him. Michael agreed to let Anna attend and paid for Anna's flight and hotel accommodation, on the condition that Anna would reimburse Michael later. However, while in Venice, Anna surprisingly paid for everything in cash, which Michael found strange. When they returned to New York, Anna was in no hurry to return the money to Michael. Eventually, Michael forgone the $3,000 outstanding. In New York, Anna befriended Rachel Williams, a former photo editor for a famous fashion magazine. Although Rachel found Anna demanding and rude, they maintained a close relationship. Anna began sharing her business idea with her friends. She wanted to buy a historic building on Park Avenue in Manhattan to create an art space called the Anna Delvey Foundation. The building would include galleries, shops, restaurants, bars, and a bakery on 6 floors. To convince others of her idea, Anna created fake financial documents using specialized software. These documents were intended to prove that she owned 60 million euros in Swiss bank accounts. Before that, Anna had taken out small loans to maintain her lavish lifestyle, and she often relied on the help of various financial advisors. In November 2016, Anna went to the City National Bank and applied for a loan of $22 million. Her reason for the loan was to finance the renovation of a historic building in collaboration with renowned designers and restorers. She mentioned that the funding was necessary because her assets were located outside the United States. Anna provided forged documents showing that she owned 60 million euros. However, the loan processing ran into problems when a bank employee noticed irregularities in the documents. The employee requested a report verifying Anna's foreign assets. The bank employee then received the document via email, which was from a person named Peter Henny. However, the bank employees were suspicious of the document because it was sent from a personal account. Anna explained that Peter was her family's financial advisor. The bank continued to scrutinize Anna's documents. But after a few months, they refused to lend to Anna because she could not prove the origin of the Swiss funds. After being rejected by the bank, Anna Delvey sought financial support from Fortress Investment Group. However, the company's CEO became suspicious of Anna's loan application due to inconsistencies in her documents. Specifically, Anna claimed to be of German origin, but her passport showed that she was born in Russia. This raised doubts about the authenticity of the information Anna provided. When the CEO began to examine Anna's assets more closely and wanted to meet her Swiss bankers in person, Anna quickly withdrew her loan application to avoid further scrutiny or investigation into her affairs. Anna's journey of fraud began with her seeking to borrow a large sum of money. Despite the difficulties and the need for guarantees from major financial institutions, she still managed to borrow $220,000 from various banks using forged documents. This success allowed her to enjoy a lavish lifestyle for many months. In 2017, Anna hosted a lavish birthday party at a luxury restaurant. However, after the party ended, the restaurant staff had to contact the guests to find Anna's contact information, as she had left without paying the bill. Anna finally resolved the issue by paying the debt in cash in February 2017. Anna also made an impression when she checked into the 11 Howard Hotel. Anna gave Neff Davis a $100 tip in exchange for information about the most upscale restaurant in Soho. Neff Davis noticed that other hotel guests often had a negative view of Anna because she often wandered around the hotel in her bathrobe. Despite this, the hotel staff were eager to serve Anna, as she was known for leaving generous tips. Anna and Neff Davis gradually developed a close relationship. Neff Davis became Anna's personal assistant. Anna paid Neff Davis's salary by inviting Neff Davis to fancy restaurants, taking Anna to high-end beauty salons and organizing luxury massages. Once, Neff Davis was invited by Anna to an exclusive party attended by famous actor McAllister. While staying at high-end hotels, Anna enjoyed many luxurious experiences. She often went to high-end beauty salons to get eyelash extensions done by top experts, costing around $400 per session. In addition, Anna also shopped for products from luxury brands and often dined at expensive restaurants. All expenses were deducted from her account at the 11 Howard Hotel. After 3 weeks of staying at the hotel management discovered that the credit card information Anna provided when checking into the room was invalid. The hotel owner demanded that Anna immediately pay the $30,000 bill. At this time, Anna was almost out of money due to her frequent spending on expensive food and services. This caused Anna's number of friends to decrease significantly, and Anna only spent time with 3 friends, Neff Davis, Casey, and Rachel. When asked about her financial situation, Anna remained silent. Once, Anna invited Neff Davis to dinner at a restaurant. After the meal, when Anna tried to pay with her bank card, her transaction was declined. She then gave the waiter 12 different credit card numbers, but none of them were accepted. Therefore, Neff Davis had to use his savings to pay the $283 bill. However, a few days later, Anna repaid Neff Davis the money, even paying back 3 times the amount owed in cash. In April 2017, Anna used forged documents to secure a $70,000 loan. She quickly used $30,000 of the money to pay off her outstanding bill at the 11 Howard Hotel. Anna Delvey planned to attend an annual investor meeting in May 2017, hoping to meet billionaire Warren Buffett. That same month, Anna invited a group of friends, including journalist Rachel Williams, fitness trainer Casey Duke, and a camera crew, on a trip to Morocco. The purpose of the trip was to film a documentary about the founding of her charity, the Anna Delvey Foundation. To stay, Anna booked a luxury villa in a 5-star hotel complex, priced at $7,000 a night. The villa had 3 bedrooms, a private pool, and an assistant. However, the trip ran into some problems. Early in the vacation, Casey Duke suffered from food poisoning and had to return to the United States for medical care. Later, the hotel staff informed Anna that they were unable to process her credit card payment. When she was unable to pay, Anna convinced Rachel Williams to pay the large bill of $62,000, an amount equal to Rachel's annual income. Rachel paid for Anna's trip to Morocco, Anna's extensive shopping spree, and her private tour of the Majoral Gardens on Rachel's credit card. Anna promised to reimburse Rachel for these expenses. However, upon their return, Anna only paid Rachel $5,000, and then had to borrow money from others to pay for her New York apartment. In July 2017, complaints about Anna began to surface, particularly from designer Mark Cremers. Mark Cremers demanded payment for her work totaling $17,000. During this time, Anna frequently moved between hotels, accumulating significant debt, and repeatedly defaulting on her bills. Eventually, Anna found her financial situation dire. She and Casey met at a restaurant to discuss her life and Anna's financial situation. At first, Anna avoided answering, but the conversation soon brought her to tears. Anna claimed that she could solve her financial problems if Anna could buy back the historic building. However, Rachel also realized that she would have a hard time recovering the money Anna owed Rachel. Rachel decided to write a letter to the local prosecutor's office denouncing Anna. Within an hour, law enforcement officers contacted Rachel and informed her that they were conducting a criminal investigation against Anna Delvey. Anna Delvey was arrested on October 3, 2017, at a rehabilitation center in Los Angeles and was charged with grand theft and check fraud. By the spring of 2019, at the age of 28, Anna was facing a months-long court case that resulted in Anna having to pay debts totaling at least $275,000 to various organizations and individuals. In 2016 to 2017, prosecutors alleged that Anna Delvey committed the fraud over a 10-month period. From November 20, 2016 to August 2017. According to prosecutors, Anna's modus operandi included financing the lavish lifestyles of her middle-class friends to avoid raising suspicions about her wealth. In turn, Anna relied on wealthier acquaintances who were less vigilant about their spending to cover Anna's expenses. In her defense, Anna's lawyer asserted that she was confident in her future financial capabilities and that she could repay the debts Anna had incurred. During the trial, she frequently wore high-end outfits and expressed dissatisfaction with the way the press covered the trial. Although she did not consider herself a scammer, she was eventually convicted and sentenced to 4 to 12 years in prison, along with a $24,000 fine. She was also ordered to pay $200,000 in restitution to her victims. In an interview, Anna admitted that she did not regret her past actions. She even stated that if given the chance, she would make the same decisions again. In 2019, Rachel Williams published a book titled My Friend Anna. The book chronicled Rachel's experiences with the scammer and the profound impact her trip to Morocco had on her life. Despite being detained, Anna's social media accounts remained active. Through her posts, Anna instructed her followers on how to contact her and how to send her money using cryptocurrency. During her time in prison, Anna paid special attention to her health and appearance. Anna committed to sleeping at least 12 hours a day and practicing yoga for 9 hours a week. Anna is proud of her positive changes. Without a phone, Anna spent her time reading. However, she was unhappy with the prison menu, especially the lack of fresh greens and broccoli. To improve the situation, Anna made her own nut milk, grew her own vegetables, and experimented with new organic products in the prison cafeteria. After serving her 4-year sentence, Anna Delvey was released on February 11, 2021. After her release, she returned to her lavish lifestyle by moving into a luxury hotel. This was made possible by the money she received from Netflix, who bought the rights to adapt her story. Part of this income was used to pay off some of Anna's outstanding debts. However, Anna's freedom did not last long. Just 6 weeks after her release, on March 25, 2021, Anna Delvey was arrested by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Anna was detained for 18 months due to her expired security visa. The decision to detain her was made because the immigration judge judged that if released, Anna would likely return to her fraudulent behavior. In February 2022, Netflix premiered the film Inventing Anna, written by Shonda Rhimes, starring Julia Garner as Anna Delvey. It is reported that Netflix paid Sorokina $320,000 for the rights to her story. Anna is currently under house arrest in an apartment in New York. During this time, she is not allowed to use the internet and strictly adheres to this rule. However, Anna still keeps in touch with her family by phone and is allowed to attend some meetings on Thursdays. Anna also continues her artistic activities by participating in magazine photo shoots and giving interviews. Recently, Anna had the opportunity to celebrate her 32nd birthday at her New York home in January 2023. Currently, Anna is nurturing ambitious plans for the future. One of her plans is to launch her own reality TV show. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Dorothy Stratton. Dorothy Ruth Stratton was born on February 28, 1960, in a neighborhood in Vancouver. Her parents were of Dutch descent and moved to Canada a year after she was born. The Stratton family later expanded with the birth of a son named John, and 7 years later, Dorothy had a younger sister named Louise. Her family lived a simple life. Dorothy was a good student. During her childhood, she did not dream of becoming famous or aspire to have a brilliant career. She only wanted to have the basic things that her poor family could not provide. In 1977, Dorothy started working at a fast food restaurant called Dairy Queen while she was still in high school. At that time, she was 17 years old, with blonde hair, a charming face, and a tall figure that attracted a lot of attention. Not only young boys but also older, wealthy men were drawn to her beauty. One evening before the diner closed, Paul Snyder, a charming young man, walked into Dorothy's workplace. Paul was quickly attracted to the young and attractive Dorothy. After ordering and paying, Paul handed her a large bill. When Dorothy said she couldn't give him the change, Paul laughed and offered her the money on the condition that she go on a date with him immediately. Dorothy agreed. Paul Snyder, 26, was a prominent figure in Vancouver. He managed and scouted models for clubs. He had many friends and connections across Canada. When Paul saw Dorothy, 17, with her blonde hair and charming smile, he immediately recognized her great potential. Paul asked Dorothy out on a date to a fancy restaurant and gave her a red evening gown. She later wore the dress to her high school prom. Paul and Dorothy began their relationship. Although Paul was 9 years older than she was, her parents did not object to their relationship. A few months into their relationship, Paul persuaded Dorothy to participate in a daring photo shoot. She was initially uncomfortable, but Paul convinced her that she had the potential to become a successful model and earn a considerable income. Dorothy eventually agreed to Paul's proposal. Paul found a studio and hired a professional photographer to take pictures of Dorothy. After completing the photo shoot, he sent the photos to the famous Playboy magazine. Dorothy's photos made a strong impression. A Playboy editor invited her to Los Angeles. However, Paul knew that Dorothy's parents would not approve of her working for such a provocative magazine. So he forged Dorothy's mother's signature, claiming that Dorothy's mother had given her permission to sign a contract with the magazine. In the summer of 1979, Paul and Dorothy went to Hollywood. By August, Dorothy had become Playboy's Playmate of the Month and began working as a bunny at the Playboy Club. However, she felt pressured by the attention and was not used to her new role. She also found it unsettling that wealthy men were infatuated with her and spent time with her. Paul Snyder was always by Dorothy's side, always willing to help her. He was in charge of taking care of every aspect of Dorothy's life, from organizing her schedule to signing contracts. However, she also felt completely controlled by Paul. To strengthen their relationship, Paul proposed marriage, and Dorothy finally agreed after some consideration. The reason she accepted the proposal was that she felt she owed him after all that Paul had done for her. In Dorothy's eyes, if it weren't for Paul, she might still be a waitress living off tips. She always felt that if she had never met him, her life would have been boring, working at the diner. However, Dorothy's family had doubts about this decision as they thought that Paul was using Dorothy for profit. Therefore, they warned her against marrying him. In 1979, the same year that Paul proposed, they held a minimalist wedding in Las Vegas. After the simple wedding in 1979, Paul and Dorothy continued to pursue their careers diligently. Dorothy also started filming, where she received recognition from directors not only for her beauty and charm but also for her real acting ability. As Dorothy's fame and fortune grew, she used her earnings to buy a spacious home in Los Angeles, where she lived with her husband. Paul Snyder was pleased with his wife's accomplishments, boasting to friends that Dorothy's growing fame was a shared success. As Dorothy's manager, Paul was always present at her photo shoots and events, overseeing their finances and assets. He also closely monitored her diet, clothing choices, and alcohol consumption at social gatherings, occasionally giving her guidance on which influential people to associate with to advance her career. There was much speculation that Dorothy had an affair with Hugh Hefner, the editor-in-chief of Playboy magazine. However, Hugh denied these claims, insisting that Dorothy was not a woman of loose morals. Over time, Dorothy began to realize that her husband Paul was controlling her life too much. Dorothy appointed a new professional manager and began to exclude her husband from photo shoots, inventing various excuses. The distance between the couple grew, and sensing this, Paul's mental state deteriorated. He became jealously protective of his wife, even hiring a private investigator to monitor her actions. However, no evidence of guilt was ever produced. Paul began to impose restrictions on his wife's clothing, not allowing her to wear provocative clothes and preventing men who did not benefit the family financially from admiring her. He incited conflicts and, in moments of anger, even resorted to physical violence. Dorothy found herself unable to tolerate her husband's aggressive outbursts and increasingly sought to distance herself from him. Friends and colleagues observed growing troubles in Paul and Dorothy's marriage. Playboy staff frequently advised her to end her relationship with her husband. While Dorothy was busy with photo shoots, Paul lived in their home, using his wife's earnings and indulging in idleness. One day, he discovered that Dorothy had set up a company in her name and was actively investing in it. The move, advised by her manager, was strategically arranged so that, in the event of a divorce, Paul Snyder would have no claim to the money. Paul's behavior escalated into more scandal as he sought his influence over his wife diminish. As Dorothy rarely returned home, Paul began to realize that his control over what he considered his golden ticket was slipping away from him. In the spring of 1980, at a gathering at the Playboy Mansion, 20-year-old Dorothy met 40-year-old film director Peter Bogdanovich, a close associate of Hugh Hefner. Peter was charmed by Dorothy and invited her to star in his upcoming comedy. Everyone laughed, and Dorothy accepted the offer to play a mistress. On March 22, Dorothy set off alone to New York to shoot the comedy. She lied to Paul, telling him that the director had forbidden anyone other than the cast and crew from being on the set. In fact, she feared that Paul might cause a disturbance during filming. Furthermore, Dorothy asked her manager to filter calls from her domineering husband while she was on set. In New York, Dorothy found herself infatuated with Peter, and a passionate affair blossomed between the actress and the director. Dorothy exuded joy at being with the new person in her life, not wanting to miss out on the opportunity with a sophisticated, wealthy, and influential director. Her attitude towards her husband became distant and cold. Dorothy spent 2 months in New York, and during this time, Paul was left alone in their large home in Los Angeles. Sometimes Paul brought other women home, who were shocked to discover that Paul was being unfaithful to such a gorgeous wife who was also a Playboy model. In April 1980, Dorothy returned to California to attend the Playboy Awards. She won the prestigious title of Model of the Year and appeared on the cover of the magazine, winning a new award. As part of the recognition, she received a lavish gift from Playboy, a Jaguar sports car, and a cash prize of $200,000. She developed a close friendship with Hugh Hefner, the editor-in-chief, who had high hopes for her. After the ceremony, Dorothy embarked on a 2-week promotional tour across Canada. During the weekend, Dorothy attended a party with director Peter. Meanwhile, she was planning to spend the final part of the tour with her family in Vancouver. However, Paul found out about these plans and immediately traveled to Vancouver, where he had experience managing clubs and numerous connections. During Dorothy's brief break, Paul coerced her into working in clubs and kept all the profits. This period led to a significant conflict between the couple. Dorothy was in tears, contemplating giving up her career to salvage the marriage. She expressed a desire to return to her parents' house with Paul and start a new life. Paul dismissed this idea. After the tour in Canada, Dorothy returned to New York to continue filming while avoiding her husband. At one point, she phoned Paul and requested some space in their relationship. Paul became depressed and angry with Dorothy. At the time, he was having an affair with a girl under the age of 18. The girl looked like a model, and Paul wanted to transform her into the next Playboy bunny. However, he soon realized that his young lover could never surpass his wife. In June 1980, on their first wedding anniversary, Paul received a heart-wrenching letter from Dorothy, in which she expressed her desire for a divorce and her intention to stop supporting him financially. This convinced Paul that his fears of Dorothy's infidelity were justified, especially as he suspected she was involved with director Peter Bogdanovich. To gather evidence of his wife's infidelity, Paul hired a private investigator. On one occasion, he called Dorothy's manager and threatened to cause trouble or even do something more serious. The manager advised Dorothy to hire bodyguards and be cautious around Paul. However, Dorothy ignored this advice. Without a green card and lacking permanent residence in the United States, Paul struggled with employment and finances. Facing the risk of running out of money, he withdrew all the funds from his and Dorothy's joint bank account. Consequently, he also sold Dorothy's valuable assets, including collectibles, jewelry, and the Jaguar sports car that Playboy had given her, all at low prices and only for cash. Furthermore, he began renting out rooms in their large house to friends, partly due to depression and loneliness. Gradually, Paul began contemplating a return to his native Canada. In mid-July, filming for the movie in which Dorothy was starring was completed. After that, Dorothy and director Peter Bogdanovich went on a 10-day vacation to England. Upon returning to Los Angeles on July 30th, Dorothy decided to move into the director's mansion in the affluent neighborhood of Bel Air. Meanwhile, Dorothy's ex-husband Paul was plotting his revenge. On the afternoon of July 31st, he borrowed a gun and went to Peter Bogdanovich's house at night. He hid near the gates of the mansion, determined to shoot anyone who came near. After hours of fruitless waiting, Paul became desperate and drove to a mountain area overlooking Los Angeles. During his time alone there, he was plagued by painful thoughts of suicide. When he returned home late at night, Paul still harbored hopes of reconciling with Dorothy. A week later, on August 8th, he convinced Dorothy to meet him at his house. However, Dorothy had changed significantly since their separation. She had become a confident woman with a newfound charm and was no longer affected by Paul's words. Dorothy told Paul that she was in love with another man and wanted a divorce. Paul remained calm and asked her to come back in a week to discuss the breakup amicably. However, the next day, Paul attempted to purchase a gun. He visited several stores but was unable to buy one because he was a Canadian citizen. Paul asks his private investigator to purchase a rifle for self-defense and home security reasons, but the private investigator advises against it and refuses to assist. On August 11th, Paul finds an ad in the newspaper for an old 12-gauge shotgun for sale. He decides to go to the San Fernando Valley to check it out and possibly purchase the shotgun. However, he gets lost and cannot find the address, so he returns without the shotgun. 2 days later, on August 13th, Paul returns to the same location and finds the seller. He purchases the old shotgun and tells the seller that he will use it for hunting. On August 14th, Paul asks his roommate to leave the house so he can talk to his wife, Dorothy, in private without interruption. Dorothy's managers and assistants advised her to accompany them to the meeting or to resolve the issues over the phone. However, Dorothy decided to go alone. She brought a large sum of money to express her gratitude to Paul for his past help. She hoped that the meeting would be peaceful and that she could maintain a friendly relationship with Paul. Dorothy planned to have a short meeting with Paul, so she scheduled a photo shoot for that evening. At noon on August 14th, Dorothy went to meet Paul at his home. Upon arrival, Dorothy received a safety check call from her manager. They had previously set up a specific code for her to use if she encountered any problems. After assuring the manager that everything was fine, the call ended. However, the conversation between Dorothy and Paul gradually became tense and escalated into a dispute. In a sudden fit of rage, Paul pulled out a gun and shot Dorothy in the face. After causing Dorothy's death, Paul seemed to lose control of himself and behaved strangely. He eventually took his own life. At 8 p.m., Dorothy's roommates returned home and found her car parked in front of the house. When they entered the house, they saw Dorothy's handbag in the living room and thought that Paul and Dorothy had made up. They assumed the couple was in the bedroom, so they decided to retreat to their own room and keep quiet. Dorothy's managers became increasingly worried when they could not reach her by phone. They finally managed to contact Paul and Dorothy's roommate at 11 p.m. After a brief conversation, the roommates decided to check out the situation in the master bedroom. When they entered, they witnessed a horrifying sight. Both Dorothy and Paul had died. According to the autopsy, Dorothy Stratton, 20, died about an hour after she arrived home. Dorothy's husband, Paul, died about an hour after his wife's death. Hugh Hefner was one of the first people to be informed of the tragic event. He called his friend Peter Bogdanovich and broke the news of Dorothy's death. When Peter heard that Dorothy had died, he was so shocked that he fainted. He then spent a long time on sedatives to overcome his pain and grief. As a result, Playboy magazine was sent out for publication before the editors knew about it, so the August cover was not changed. Consequently, the magazine was published with a picture of Dorothy Stratton, who had tragically passed away. However, for the annual Playboy issue, her image was replaced with that of another model. Peter Bogdanovich was responsible for organizing and financing Dorothy Stratton's funeral. The loss of his lover had a profound impact on him. He decided to cremate her remains, which were then buried in a Los Angeles cemetery. After the tragic death of the model, the film studio decided not to release They All Laughed, the comedy in which Dorothy had starred. Determined to promote the work, Peter bought the film rights with his own money. The comedy, They All Laughed, was finally released in 1981. Despite his efforts, the film did not receive significant praise and failed to attract much audience attention. This commercial failure cost Peter millions of dollars and eventually led to his bankruptcy. Several years after Dorothy Stratton's death, rumors surfaced that director Peter Bogdanovich had secretly met with Dorothy's younger sister, Louise Stratton, who was then 13 years old. The Stratton family strongly denied these claims and took legal action against the spread of these rumors. However, in 1988, 8 years later, Peter, then 49, actually married Louise Stratton, who was then 20. Louise later stated in interviews that their romance began when she was 18. Peter Bogdanovich and Louise Stratton were married for 13 years, ending in divorce in 2001. Peter never remarried, devoting his life to filmmaking. He died in 2022 at the age of 82. Louise Stratton, who now resides in her hometown of Vancouver, pursued a career as an actress and film director. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Megan Newton. Megan Newton was born in 2001 to Michael and Sarah, and she also has a half-sister named Demi. Megan spends most of her time with her mother, Sarah. The two have a very close bond. They are like best friends, and Megan never hides anything from her mother. Sarah often consults her daughter on various important issues. She finds that Megan has shown wisdom beyond her years. Sarah describes her daughter as very ambitious, energetic, and easygoing. Megan's friends also describe her as humorous, compassionate, and thoughtful. Megan describes herself as having a heart of gold. Ever since she was a child, she has always been willing to help others. During her elementary school years, Megan became acquainted with a friend who had just moved from China to England. Because her English is limited and she often has difficulty learning and communicating, her teacher decides to assign Megan to help her new friend, hoping that Megan's compassion and helpful nature will help her adapt quickly. Megan is very helpful and overcomes the language barrier to support her classmate. Megan's kindness and openness continued as she grew older, showing through her passion for sports, especially soccer. She joined the Stoke-on-Trent girls' soccer team and spent her weekends coaching girls under 7. Megan hopes to win a sports scholarship to the United States because she loves soccer and wants to pursue a career in the field. Megan even showed her love for the game by getting a small tattoo of a soccer boot. After completing her studies, Megan began her university journey with the goal of becoming a sports therapist or physiotherapist. This was a milestone as she was the first member of her family to attend a higher education institution. Megan Newton was a talented young student, ready for a bright future. Megan had been living an independent life, confident in her ability to plan and make decisions. She had moved into her own flat in a high-rise building on Fletcher Road. One night, Megan decided to go out with friends to a nightclub in Hanley. They spent the night dancing, drinking, and having fun. Early on Saturday morning, before 3 a.m., Megan took a taxi home with a friend and a young man. The next morning, a neighbor discovered a set of keys near the building with blood stains. These keys were handed to a housing officer, who noticed the blood splatter and decided to check on the occupants of the flat. When they entered the apartment with a neighbor, they witnessed a horrific scene. Megan's body was found on the bed, naked, bloody and lying face down. Megan had been stabbed multiple times with a kitchen knife, which was found near the scene of the murder. Identification documents identified the victim as Megan Newton, helping police identify the innocent young woman who was murdered in her bedroom. When the police arrived at the scene, they quickly informed Megan's family of the painful end. The family went to the morgue to identify their daughter. The police and forensics cordoned off the crime scene and collected vital information at Megan's apartment. The autopsy revealed the horrific extent of the attack she had suffered. Megan had been strangled, rendered unconscious, and then stabbed 9 times in the back, puncturing both lungs. There was also evidence of sexual assault. The fatal weapon, a kitchen knife, was found in Megan's home. The autopsy revealed that it was the stab wounds that led to Megan Newton's death. The bloody knife and apartment key were sent to the lab for forensic analysis, hoping to find the killer's DNA. It is suspected that the killer accidentally dropped the key when leaving Megan's apartment after the crime. Police began gathering information from Megan's acquaintances and relatives. Through this, they determined that Megan spent the evening at a club before calling a taxi home early in the morning. Police have been closely examining surveillance footage from the area near the nightclub and Megan's route home to track her final movements. Police are particularly interested in footage that shows Megan getting into a taxi with a friend and an unidentified young man. Another video from inside Megan's apartment complex showed the same young man as before, this time appearing on the premises. Fortunately, a camera was placed in a common hallway, giving police a clear view of the entrance to Megan's apartment, especially on the night of the crime. The police's goal is to identify the killer by carefully analyzing video footage from that night. At approximately 3:44 a.m., Megan and the young man she had shared a taxi with about an hour earlier entered the lobby of the apartment building. The two headed toward her apartment, with Megan appearing cheerful. When she reached the door, Megan used her key to unlock it and the two entered. The camera captured the moment as Megan unlocked the door. The young man standing behind her looked around the area, even looking into the camera. This behavior led the police to suspect that the young man may have intended to harm Megan. A closer look at video footage from the rest of that night revealed that the young man left the apartment the next morning at approximately 5:54 a.m. He attempted to leave the building but realized he did not have the key to the door. He returned to Megan's apartment, retrieved the key, and left. An outside surveillance camera captured him throwing an object, and a neighbor later discovered the apartment key was stained with blood. The camera also recorded him leaving the scene. He checked his hands and they appeared to be bloody. The police identified this young man as the main suspect. Police investigating the Megan Newton case investigated the surveillance footage and discovered that a man named Joseph Trevor had approached the nightclub, got into the same taxi as Megan, and then went to her apartment. Joseph Trevor is an 18-year-old boy from a family where both parents are police officers. He lives in a neighboring district and is Megan Newton's high school classmate. Joseph has good academic performance and a passion for sports, especially soccer. Joseph even won a sports scholarship to study in the United States and has played professional soccer for Newcastle. Those who know Joseph mostly consider him a kind, easygoing, and sociable person. But few people know that he has another side to his personality, which is erratic and unpredictable. Joseph can switch from being cheerful and engaging to being withdrawn, rude, and abrupt without any apparent reason. However, when the police investigated the Megan Newton case, they began to focus on Joseph's past. About 3 years ago, when Joseph was 15, he was accused by someone else of forcing a girl to have intimate contact, although the attempt was unsuccessful and Joseph was not charged or imprisoned, but many people at school knew about the incident. The police discovered that Joseph had also attended a party with friends the night before. They met at a bar, where Megan was also present. Although they knew each other from school, they only said hello and continued to enjoy their private time. However, Joseph did not stay at the bar for long. Security found him with a package of white powder suspected to be drugs, so they took him outside and called the police. When police arrived at the scene, they arrested Joseph and took him to a nearby police station. The police may have known that Joseph's parents were also police officers, so Joseph was released shortly thereafter. The police confiscated the ketamine and advised Joseph to return home and avoid using illegal drugs. Against the police's advice, Joseph did not return home. He went straight back to the club where Megan was. Joseph was then denied entry to the club. At 2:40 a.m., after Megan left the club, she ran into Joseph in the taxi queue. Joseph told Megan what had happened at the police station. Joseph expressed his concern about being scolded by his parents for drinking too much. And Joseph's parents were police officers, so they might have known about his arrest for illegal drug possession. Joseph felt anxious and did not know what to do next. Megan, out of kindness and willingness to help, lent Joseph her phone to try to contact a friend. However, Joseph could not find a place to stay for the night. When she found Joseph in a drunken and disorderly state, Megan invited Joseph to spend the night on her living room sofa. Megan and her friend took Joseph by taxi. On the way, Joseph texted his father, saying he had spent the night at a friend's house. When they arrived at the Fletcher Road apartment building, the taxi dropped Megan's friend off first. The taxi then took Megan and Joseph to the apartment building. The cameras captured them entering the building. Some time later, Joseph came out and threw the keys in the yard. Police believe that, during this time, Joseph brutally attacked Megan, leading to her tragic death. Joseph could not contest the charges because the evidence was clear. Joseph went to a bridge in Stoke-on-Trent and climbed onto the railing, sitting looking down at the pavement. It appeared that Joseph was about to jump to escape the consequences of his actions. However, Joseph had a history of depression and attempted suicide. Joseph had been found on this bridge before, when a passerby alerted the police. Joseph was taken to hospital for a psychological evaluation and was later determined to be safe to leave. He returned home under the supervision of his father. Joseph returned home and told his mother the whole truth. Joseph felt he could no longer keep the secret and realized the serious consequences of his actions. Joseph's mother immediately contacted the police to relay his confession. At that time, the police identified Joseph as the prime suspect through surveillance camera footage. They were on their way to arrest Joseph. When brought to the police station for questioning, Joseph admitted to having been to Megan's house that evening. However, he did not provide details about the attack. Joseph's account was consistent with the surveillance camera footage, which showed him entering her apartment. Joseph said that Megan voluntarily gave him the sofa. After the intercourse, Joseph suffered amnesia and had no recollection of subsequent events. Joseph maintained that the relationship between him and her was consensual and not assaultive. However, the police did not believe Joseph's story. They suspected that Joseph had deliberately erased important memories and that he was fully aware of his actions. The police believed that Joseph was fully conscious throughout. Joseph changed his story repeatedly. First, Joseph took partial responsibility for Megan's death. Then, Joseph admitted to killing Megan, but maintained that their sexual relationship was consensual. Joseph maintained this story until his trial on February 17, 2020. However, during the trial, Joseph unexpectedly pleaded guilty to all charges. Joseph was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving a minimum of 21 years. During the trial, Joseph turned to Megan's mother, Sarah, and said, "Sorry." This confession, by this point, no longer made sense, and it made her extremely angry. Apologies cannot fix the past or ease the pain Megan's family has endured while awaiting trial. Megan's best friend, Ricardo Eccles, shared that they had planned to go shopping in Manchester the day after Megan's death. Ricardo was devastated when he heard the news of Megan's sudden passing. The news shocked Ricardo. However, in memory of Megan, Ricardo started a fundraising campaign to help cover the funeral costs for Megan's family. Ricardo successfully raised some money, which was then given to Megan's mother. Megan has always been there for those in need, and now it's time for them to show their gratitude. Megan's family and loved ones need emotional support and help during this difficult time. Megan was a fan of Stoke City Football Club. During a match, the players and fans observed a minute's silence in her memory. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Callie Ann Poulton. Callie Ann Poulton was born on September 20, 1989, in Rochester, New York. She was the only child in her family, and Callie's parents gave her all their attention and love. When Callie was 3 years old, her parents decided to divorce and Callie lived with her mother. Her father maintained a good relationship with his ex-wife and visited Callie often. Callie's mother, Judy, moved to an apartment complex in the quiet area suburb of Rochester. Although Judy's ex-husband helped take care of Callie, she still had financial difficulties. When Callie was 4 years old, Judy found a part-time job to save money for a trip to Disney World with Callie the following summer. Judy's job was to deliver magazines to customers in her neighborhood. On the evening of May 23, 1994, Judy was getting ready for her job. Judy was sitting at home, putting flyers in the magazine before going out to socialize. At that time, Callie asked permission to go for a walk because she wanted to ride her tricycle on a beautiful evening. Judy looked outside and saw many other children playing in the yard, so Judy agreed to let her daughter go outside for a few minutes. However, when Judy finished getting ready and went outside to call Callie home, she could not find Callie there. Judy looked around but could not find Callie. She searched the yard and her body but could not find her daughter. She also could not hear Callie's tricycle, although it often made a clear noise. As time passed, Judy's worry increased and she began asking neighbors if they had seen Callie. Some reported seeing Callie playing with her friends in the yard, but did not know where she went after that. When the neighbors learned that Callie was missing, they joined in the search but were unable to find Callie or her bicycle. Judy believed that her daughter could not have gone anywhere on her own because she had taught Callie to only ride her bike in their yard. Callie had never told her mother, and Callie's little bike could not take her far. Judy also thought that if Callie went out of the yard, she would be discovered immediately. Fearing the worst, Judy decided to contact the police for assistance. Within minutes, the police arrived at the scene and began an urgent search. Firefighters and canine units soon joined the search. The police conducted a house-to-house search and searched the surrounding area. They believed that Callie was still somewhere in the area. Since the kidnapping was a possibility, the police suspected that the kidnappers might be residents of the complex. The reason is that the area has quite strict security controls, so it is unlikely that a stranger would enter the area and snatch Callie out of the yard without anyone noticing. The complex has a total of 300 apartments, and the residents are willing to cooperate with the police, opening their doors for them to search. In case no one is home, the complex manager will provide a spare key for the lock so that the police can check. However, all these efforts do not bring the desired results. No apartment has ever found Callie or her bicycle. The search continued throughout the night, and around 4 a.m., the mission was reclassified as a kidnapping. A special police unit took over the project, and the undercovers asked Judy if there was anyone in their lives who might want to harm them. When the police asked about someone who might be involved in Callie's disappearance, Judy quickly met a man in the apartment complex that made her suspicious. The man, Mark, 22 years old, had just moved in with his wife and 1.5-year-old son. During the conversation with Mark, Judy felt that his actions were very strange. During a conversation, Mark said that Judy's daughter was very beautiful, but his tone of voice made Judy feel uncomfortable. What was more worrying was when Mark said that he had seen all the girls in the apartment complex and thought Callie was the prettiest. Mark once asked Judy a very surprising question. He wanted to know if Callie would talk to Judy if someone tried to touch Callie. Judy answered yes and immediately left the yard. Before that, Callie liked to play with Mark on the playground, but since that conversation, Judy has not let her daughter near him, even when she is present. During the conversation with the secrets, Judy recalled another detail. After she went out to look for Callie, she saw Mark walking out to the playground with his son. She asked him if he had seen Callie, and Mark said no. Judy also noticed something strange, that Mark's sneakers were missing their shoelaces, but she did not pay much attention to it at the time. The police decided to mark the matter and took him to the headquarters to determine some issues. Mark denied any involvement in Callie's disappearance and agreed to take a lie detector test. The test results showed that Mark answered truthfully, so he was released. In addition, Judy accidentally provided an alibi for Mark when she saw him playing with her son on the playground at the exact time she was looking for Callie. The police went to Mark's apartment early in the investigation but did not find Callie or Callie's bike. After eliminating Mark as a suspect, the undercover police continued their investigation. They began to investigate Judy to see if she was involved in Callie's disappearance. Judy understood that this was part of the investigation process and answered all of their questions honestly. Callie's disappearance attracted public attention when information about the incident was broadcast on local newspapers and posted on billboards all over the city. The alert received many calls with information, but after a thorough investigation, all of them turned up nothing. However, Judy did not give up and continued to search for Callie. Judy devoted all her time and energy to finding Callie. She contacted the media and did everything she could to find Callie. Some compassionate people have also come forward to help her, not only helping to distribute flyers but also raising a $100,000 reward for any useful information about Callie's disappearance. Judy was invited to appear on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Callie's disappearance was featured on a popular television show about unsolved cases. The police investigated the case for 2 years without success. Although they gathered some clues, nothing helped them find a solution. On August 9, 1996, when a woman called the police and told them about a serious argument between her and her husband. During the call, the woman said she was tired of her husband's strange behavior and wanted a divorce. The man tried to convince her not to do so, and told her about the difficulties he was facing. Suddenly, the man confessed a terrible secret: he had killed Callie. The woman was shocked and took her child to her father's house immediately. She then called 911 and revealed her husband's name as Mark Christie, who was also Judy's neighbor. The detectives were surprised to hear her story, but they soon encountered a serious problem. Under state law, any information shared between spouses is protected and cannot be used as evidence in court. This means that even if Mark tells the truth, the police cannot arrest or question him. Furthermore, the police recalled that Mark's apartment was searched in the early hours of the investigation, and he was in the yard with his child shortly after Callie went missing. This led the police to suspect that Mark did not have enough time to kidnap and kill Callie. After listening to Mark's wife's story, Detective Crow decided to find out more information. Through the investigation, Crow discovered that Mark and his family had moved out of the apartment complex just weeks after Callie went missing. Because the parents of the 2 girls accused Mark of standing naked in front of their house in full view. However, no formal investigation was conducted into this, because by law, Mark was standing in his own home. However, Mark's actions have raised considerable suspicion in the detective's mind. When Detective Crow visits Mark in another city 50 miles from Rochester, he is stopped by Mark's mother. She refuses to allow the detective to see Mark and demands the presence of a lawyer. Mark's mother states that her son will not answer any questions without his lawyer present. Mark seems to know about his wife's report to the police, and Detective Crow realizes that there is little he can do in this situation. Mark's confession to his wife cannot be used as evidence in court. However, Detective Crow is not giving up yet. While talking to Mark's mother, he convinces Mark to agree to answer some questions about Callie's case. Crow suggests that they go to a nearby restaurant and chat over coffee. Mark agrees, but only if Crow takes him to see his lawyer afterward. They stop at a nearby Italian restaurant. During this time, Detective Crow chatted with Mark in a friendly manner, trying not to pressure him. The tactic worked, and Mark began to speak. He expressed remorse for what he had done to Callie, saying that his actions had haunted him for the past 2 years. According to Crow, Mark kept seeing Callie's picture in newspapers and flyers, and her face seemed to follow him everywhere. To avoid scaring Mark, Crow approached the conversation cautiously. Although he had known Mark since the early days of the investigation, this was not their first conversation. Crow told Mark that he had fooled the entire police team. Mark responded that he did not want to boast, but the way he had disposed of the bike was very clever. Mark asked Crow if he wanted to know the details, but he warned that he would only talk about the bike and not reveal any more information. Crow tried to keep his tone light and friendly to avoid scaring Mark and gather as much information as possible. Mark wanted Crow to know that Callie's tricycle had been stored in his apartment for 3 days since Callie had gone missing. Mark knew that the police would search all apartments without a warrant because it was protocol when a child was in danger. Mark quickly decided to disassemble the bike into small parts and hide them in hard-to-find places in the apartment. Mark carefully hid some of the parts in his clothes and put them in the closet, while the other parts were put in small bags and hidden in his car. Mark then slowly disposed of these bags, storing them in places far from the apartment. During this time, the police were stationed at the exit of the apartment complex, checking each bike. Since they were only looking for Callie, these small bags did not attract their attention. Detective Crow sees an opportunity to get a full confession from Mark. So he begins to tell Mark that Callie's death may not have been his fault, but a tragic accident. Mark asks what sentence he could face, and Crow suggests that it could be around 25 years. Mark argues that it would be unfair for him to spend half his life behind bars, away from his wife and son. He also says that he has been living with his own personal grief for the past 2 years, and that should be taken into account when making a decision. Although these words may seem like an excuse, Crow continues his tactics. He advises Mark to ease his grief and tell what really happened. Mark says that he is willing to confess everything, but only after talking to a lawyer. Crow understands that the lawyer will not allow Mark to confess to the crime without evidence against him. So Crow told Mark that if he did not tell the truth, Callie's parents would never know what happened to Callie, or whether Callie suffered before she died. Mark replied, "Callie did not suffer." Crow felt that Mark was ready to confess, so he advised Mark to do the right thing for himself, his family, and God. Upon hearing this, Mark looked at Crow and finally admitted his crime. He reiterated that Callie did not suffer and confessed that he had strangled Callie. Mark added to his story that he had not done anything bad to Callie. However, Mark said that that evening, Callie came to his apartment and wanted to play with her 1.5-year-old son. Since he knew that Callie's mother would not agree to her coming to his house, Mark decided to keep quiet about it. When Callie entered the apartment, Callie went upstairs and went into the room to play with Mark's child. After about 10 minutes, Mark heard Callie's mother calling her name in the yard and became worried. Mark feared that Callie's mother would be angry that he had allowed her into the house without permission. Mark decided to go up to the and strangle Callie with his bare hands. Detective Crow questioned the accuracy of this story. It seemed that Mark had intended to lure Callie into his apartment by taking advantage of his wife's absence, and the excuse of playing with his son may have been just an excuse. There, Mark may have approached Callie, and when he heard Judy calling Callie's name, he feared that Callie would reveal what had just happened. In addition, Crow also recalled the detail that Judy had seen him wearing sneakers without laces, which he could have used as a deadly instrument. This means that the crime was not spontaneous, but planned by Mark. Mark tried to minimize the severity of his crime by changing some details in the story. But Detective Crow understood that if he spoke out his suspicions, Mark might change his mind and refuse to talk about what he did to Callie. So Detective Crow continued to act and listen to the story. Mark claimed that after the murder, he carried Callie's body into the kitchen and left her on the floor. He then took his son outside to create an alibi for himself, in order to divert the police's suspicions. Mark knew that Judy was calling his daughter's name in the yard. In order not to arouse suspicion, Mark wanted Judy to see him. Mark then returned home and placed the laundry basket on top of Callie's body, covering it with clothes. After a few minutes, he put the basket in the trunk of his car and took his son to work. At that time, many people were searching for Callie and no one paid attention to Mark. When he arrived at the company, Mark parked his car and left the laundry basket at the back door of the building. Then he drove forward, then Mark turned back and lied to his co-workers that he had forgotten something at work to cover up his actions. Then Mark climbed onto a tank of liquid coolant and dropped Callie in, before tying a heavy metal object to Callie. Then Mark threw away Callie's clothes, but did not remove Callie earrings. Finally, Mark returned home and joined the search for Callie with other neighbors. Mark took Callie's body out of his workplace before the police arrived to investigate. When confessing his crime, Mark said that killing Callie was a big mistake. After providing the necessary information to Detective Crow, Mark paid for the meal and left a $2 tip. He then accompanied the detective to the police station and was arrested for murder. Mark's attorney attempted to withdraw his confession, but was unsuccessful. Since Mark had volunteered the information, Detective Crow had not broken any laws. Mark's confession was still admissible. The police went to Mark's workplace and opened the box containing Callie's body. 2 years after Mark killed Callie, Callie's body was still in the box. Due to the high level of decomposition, experts were unable to determine the cause of death or any other details. They were only able to confirm the victim's identity, and Callie's family was finally able to bury Callie. Mark pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years in prison. Mark's lawyer had previously negotiated a deal that would see the kidnapping charges dropped and Mark would face only the murder charge. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Gabby Doolin. Gabby Doolin was born on December 26, 2007, in Scottsville, Kentucky, to her father, Brian Doolin, and mother, Amy Doolin. Scottsville is a small farming community where many people know each other. The town does not have many options for entertainment, so school sports are a big part of the locals' lives, especially soccer. Schools host regular games and tournaments, and for the locals, participating in sports is a tradition. Gabby's family is no exception. She has 2 older brothers, and her parents encourage their children to participate in sports. When Gabby turned 7 in November 2015, her town prepared for the biggest football game of the year. Her school's football team would be playing against a team from another county. Gabby's older brother was on the football team, and she was on the cheerleading squad. The whole town was looking forward to the game. Gabby's family was going to the game, and Gabby convinced Brian and Amy to let her go with them. They initially planned to leave Gabby at home but eventually agreed to take her. When they got to the stadium, Gabby was excited to see her friends and asked her mom if she could hang out with them. Amy agreed but asked her to stay on campus and play with the other kids. During the entire time, Gabby kept running back and forth between her mom and her friends, playing and having a good time. Gabby also went to Brian in the announcer's room and asked for some money to buy snacks. After a while, Gabby's friends came up to Amy in the stands. Her mom took one look and noticed that Gabby wasn't among them. Gabby's friends asked her if she had seen Gabby and were worried. Amy said she hadn't seen Gabby in a while. She then asked why they were worried, and the girls explained that they had been playing hide and seek. Gabby had been assigned to look for them, and they had been hiding in the restroom. However, as time passed and Gabby had not arrived, the girls decided to leave the hideout to look for her. When they left the hideout, the girls could not find Gabby. They called her name and checked all the places they had played before, but Gabby seemed to have disappeared. The girls began to worry and thought that Gabby might have gone to the stands with her mother. After hearing the story, Amy began to panic and ran to her husband. Amy told Brian that Gabby was missing. Brian immediately began searching the area around the stadium. Meanwhile, Amy went to the snack bar where Gabby wanted to go and began looking for her there. After searching and finding no sign of Gabby outside the waiting areas around the stadium, Brian and Amy returned to the broadcast room and made an announcement over the loudspeaker in the hope that Gabby would hear them. This did not yield any results. Brian and Amy did not give up and continued to ask the people present to let them know if they knew where Gabby was. And several people joined them in the search for Gabby. They then continued to search the area around the stadium and asked the workers to light up the stadium areas with large lights. They also went deep into the surrounding areas of the baseball field, especially the small woods behind it. Despite their efforts, they still did not find her. It had been about a quarter of an hour since Gabby had gone missing, and Brian and Amy decided to call the police. The police arrived shortly after, heard what Gabby's parents and friends had to say, and immediately began an urgent search. While there had been previous missing persons cases, none had involved children. As such, they were rare in small towns, and the police were immediately faced with the worst-case scenario, especially when there were signs of crimes involving children, such as kidnappings and assaults. In that context, they were immediately faced with another difficult problem: the perpetrator could be at the stadium. This fact made the police alert and accelerated the investigation. The police realized that they did not have much time and that everyone would be going home soon. Therefore, they decided to stop the game and lock down the stadium, keeping everyone inside. The police closely guarded all exits to prevent anyone from sneaking out. To avoid disrupting the search efforts, the police did not inform people about what was happening. If people knew that the police were investigating the kidnapping of a 7-year-old girl that had occurred nearby, the situation could have become chaotic. Meanwhile, the state police arrived at the school and began searching the area. In a location in the woods, they stumbled upon a small creek and discovered the body of a young girl. They identified the victim as Gabby and called an ambulance to take the body to the medical examiner's office. After a preliminary examination, the police determined that the girl's cause of death was asphyxiation, as there were obvious marks on her neck. Furthermore, part of the girl's clothing was missing, leading the police to suspect that Gabby had been sexually assaulted. Amy saw an ambulance near the woods and thought that the police had found her daughter, so she rushed there but was stopped by the police. They did not want her to see the horrific scene. The police were investigating the murder and decided to move everyone from the stadium to the school gym. They suspected that the killer might be among them and needed to find a way to identify him. The detectives spoke to Brian and Amy, telling them about what might have happened to Gabby. The detectives also asked Brian and Amy if they had any suspicions about who might have committed this heinous act. They wanted to know if they had noticed anyone suspicious or if anyone had threatened their family. However, Brian and Amy insisted that they had no idea who might have done this. The detectives then spoke to Gabby's friends, asking them if they had seen anything strange. The detectives wanted to know if anyone had been following or watching them. But the girls said they could not recall anything of the sort. The police also took Gabby's friends to the gym and asked them to take a close look at the people present. They hoped that the girls might remember something. However, this did not lead to anything. The detectives believed that Gabby's friends might have seen the kidnapper but were too afraid to point him out or did not realize the significance of what they had seen due to their age. So the detectives asked them to recall every detail of that evening. Finally, one of them recalled that while she and Gabby were in the bathroom, she had seen a man standing near the door. The girl could barely remember what he looked like, except that he was wearing a denim jacket. The police questioned the ticket seller at the game, and he also remembered the man with the denim jacket. He said the man looked strange and drunk. However, the police were still unable to identify the man. The police continued to interview the people who attended the game, and gradually everyone learned why they were being held. When they realized that they might be in the same room as the killer, everyone was scared, especially for the safety of their children. But they still cooperated with the police and answered their questions. Investigators compared the list of names of all the men in the gym to the sex offender registry but found no matches. The police also visited the homes of several sex offenders who lived nearby, but all had solid alibis, and none of them were near the school at the time. Meanwhile, the police continued to interview people at the school and found some important clues. Some people told the police that during the game, they saw a man named Timothy Madden near the girls' restroom, acting suspiciously. He was a local, so many people knew him. Witnesses also said that he was wearing a denim jacket, a description that matched that given by one of Gabby's friends, who also saw a man near the restroom. Another witness was a distant relative of Timothy. He said that Timothy seemed unusual during the game. His youngest son was playing on the field, but Timothy was not paying attention. This was very strange because Timothy was usually very interested in his son's athletic achievements. He even seemed lost. Other witnesses also said that Timothy's behavior seemed strange, which prompted investigators to talk to him. By nightfall, almost everyone at the school had been released. The officers decided to go and question Timothy, but they had first consulted with the local police chief. The police chief had known Timothy since childhood and thought that Timothy was unlikely to commit his crimes, citing that Timothy's criminal record was mostly clean, except for minor traffic fines. The officers then went to Timothy's home, where he lived with his wife and 5 children. When they arrived, the officers knocked on the door and Timothy answered. They asked him if he knew why they were there. He replied that he knew about Gabby's murder but denied any involvement. In an attempt to elicit a response, the detectives asked if he had any explanation for a video recording showing him talking to the victim, Gabby, before she was killed. In fact, no such video existed. Timothy initially said he did not know what the officers were referring to. However, he quickly recanted his statement. He admitted that he had spoken to Gabby that evening near the stadium. He explained that he had stepped outside to smoke a cigarette when a group of girls ran past him. Moments later, Gabby walked by and asked if he had seen her friends while they were playing hide-and-seek and needed to be found. Timothy claimed to have directed her to the girls, and then she left. Detectives were skeptical of Timothy's rapidly changing story. His account indicated that he had been at the scene just minutes before the victim went missing, and there were no witnesses outside the stadium at the time, raising concerns that he may have had the opportunity to commit the crime. Detectives then asked for DNA samples and the clothes he was wearing at the stadium, which Timothy agreed to. However, when examining the clothing, police discovered what appeared to be blood stains on his pants, denim jacket, and underwear. When asked about the stains, Timothy claimed that they were just stains and that the police had made a mistake. Detectives were skeptical, but they needed to wait for the results of DNA analysis before making an arrest. Although the case was a priority for the lab, the analysis took several days to complete. The medical examiner completed an autopsy and confirmed that Gabby's cause of death was indeed strangulation. They then took a biological sample from Timothy, which was sent to the lab for analysis. Police received an unexpected lead in the form of an anonymous letter reporting a suspicious man at the game. The letter included specific details, such as the make and model of the person's car and the license plate number. This allowed investigators to quickly identify the owner of the car. The owner of the car, a student who lived about half an hour's drive from Scottsville, was quickly questioned by police. However, he denied attending the game and claimed not to have heard of the murder. He also provided an alibi, saying he was at work that evening. Police checked his alibi and found it credible, eliminating him as a suspect. However, the anonymous letter writer was never identified, leaving questions about the letter writer's motives. It is possible that someone was trying to frame the innocent student or play a prank on him. Police received another lead after several people reported suspicious behavior by a local 16-year-old boy. He initially claimed to have attended the game, but later denied having done so. He also mentioned witnessing girls playing hide-and-seek. Upon further investigation, detectives discovered that the boy was Timothy Madden's son. Furthermore, they discovered that just 2 weeks before the murder, the boy had gotten into a heated argument with his father, even holding a knife to his father's neck and threatening to kill him. When the police learned of this information, they went to the boy to investigate. However, they needed the boy's parents to be present to conduct the investigation. The boy's mother refused to provide a DNA sample, preventing the police from conducting further investigation. Rumors about this investigation spread quickly in Scottsville. People began to talk about the police investigating the Madden family in connection with Gabby's murder. Various theories were put forward, with some people thinking that one of Madden's older sons might be the culprit. Others suspected Madden himself or thought that he might be covering for his sons. Gabby's parents also heard about these rumors and were shocked. Gabby's father had known Timothy since 3rd grade and knew the family well. Their sons had played football together, and their daughters had cheered together. The two families were very close, even sitting next to each other at games. So Gabby's parents found it hard to believe that anyone in the Madden family could be involved in the murder. After rumors spread throughout the town, the Madden's eldest son, then 20, began exchanging information with local officers on social media using profanity and threats, asking them to keep their distance from his family. Due to the content of his threats, the police were forced to arrest him immediately and discovered that he had an outstanding warrant for his arrest in another town. Specifically, he was suspected of assaulting a teenage girl. After being brought in for questioning, he insisted that he was not the perpetrator of the murder and that he was simply upset about the accusations against his family. Importantly, he said he had been at his cousin's house in a nearby town on the night of the murder. He also agreed to provide a DNA sample to assist in the investigation. Gabby's funeral took place on November 20th, 6 days after the murder, and was attended by hundreds of people from Scottsville and the surrounding areas. They raised a significant amount of money to help Gabby's parents cover funeral expenses. Meanwhile, the DNA analysis of Timothy and his son had been completed at the lab, and the samples had been compared to the blood and semen samples collected. The results of the analysis showed that the DNA evidence was a perfect match. The semen found on Gabby's body belonged to Timothy Madden, and the blood on Timothy's clothing belonged to Gabby. As soon as this information was available, detectives notified Brian and Amy of the discovery of the killer. At the same time, the police also went to Timothy's house and arrested him. When Timothy was taken to the police station, he shouted to reporters that he was innocent. He later explained that the blood on his clothes was from scratching himself while passing through a fence. This contradicted his initial statement to the police that it was not blood but mud. With the DNA evidence matching, the investigators took the case to court, and the prosecution announced that they would seek the death penalty. During the preparation for trial, Timothy's lawyer asserted that his client was innocent and that the source of the evidence was questionable. The lawyer argued that Timothy was at the stadium at the time of the murder to film the game. However, Timothy himself told the police that he had seen Gabby at the same time. The attorney also pointed out that although Gabby's body was found in a creek, Timothy's clothes were dry when he returned to the stadium, raising questions about the accuracy of the evidence. Timothy's mother claimed that her son returned home in clean clothes, did not appear to be upset, and behaved as usual. However, the prosecution argued that the suspect's semen found on the victim's body disproved all of these arguments. The presence of semen could not be explained otherwise, and therefore Timothy's involvement in the case could not be denied. The police believe that Timothy's account of that evening contained some truth. He may have left the stadium during the game and encountered Gabby, who was looking for her friend. Since Gabby knew Timothy well, she may have approached him and asked for information about her friends. That may have been when Timothy came up with a plan, suggesting that the friends had run into the woods behind the baseball field and offering to escort Gabby there. When Gabby and Timothy were only a few hundred meters from the school, Timothy could have attacked Gabby and then returned to his friends. For years after the murder, in 2019, the parties began discussing a plea deal. The prosecution proposed to overturn the death penalty and exchange it for a life sentence on the condition that Timothy admitted his guilt. Brian and Amy agreed to this decision because the wait for trials was a heavy burden for them. They also worried that if the trial began, they would have to attend hearings for months, reliving the pain of their daughter's death all over again. Timothy eventually agreed and confessed. However, the agreement did not require him to reveal the details of what he had done. He only had to admit his guilt. This did not satisfy Gabby's family, who wanted Timothy to fully admit what he had done to their daughter. During Timothy's trial, the atmosphere became tense when Brian loudly yelled at Timothy. Eventually, the judge had to intervene, suspend the trial, and order the men to be separated. As a result, Timothy was sentenced to life in prison and served his sentence in a maximum security prison. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in Allamon Springs, Florida. She grew up in a happy family with an older brother, a younger sister, and loving parents. Her father traveled frequently for work in several states, so he was not always home. As a child, Jessica was active and cheerful. She enjoyed spending time outdoors with her friends and siblings and had a special love for animals. On April 5, 1996, when she was 9 years old, her family decided to visit her grandparents for Easter. That morning, her father left the house to do some shopping, while her mother stayed behind to clean up and prepare for the trip. After school, Jessica came home and asked her mother if she could go out to play in the apartment complex. The area was relatively safe because it was far from the main road and had many trees around. Her mother agreed but asked Jessica to play only in the yard. A few hours later, around 6 p.m., Jessica's father returned home and asked his wife where Jessica was. She was surprised because her daughter was supposed to be in the yard waiting for her father, but he insisted that she was not there. The parents went outside and searched the yard but did not find Jessica. Feeling worried, they decided to ask the neighbors in the hope that someone had seen their daughter. One neighbor said that he had seen Jessica in the front yard, sitting on the couch reading a book. But that did not help in finding Jessica. When darkness fell and their daughter was still missing, they decided to call the police. The police arrived a few minutes later and began searching and interviewing the neighbors. Despite their efforts, they could not find Jessica, so they expanded the search area to nearby streets. A few hours later, the police station received an unexpected call. The caller's voice was drowned out by loud noise, but the operator could still hear it. The caller revealed that the police would find the missing girl near a water pump station a few miles from her home. The police rushed to the pump station to check on the caller's instructions and witnessed a heartbreaking scene. Before them was the body of a girl lying near the station, hidden in a black trash bag. Just a few meters from the road, the pump station was under a bridge and could not be seen. The police quickly identified the victim as Jessica Knott and turned her body over to the medical examiner. Meanwhile, investigators focused on finding the person who made the 911 call and reported the news, as they believed the call came from the killer. But there was a challenge. The call was made from a public phone at a gas station less than a mile from the crime scene, and by the time the police arrived, the perpetrator was gone. Detectives tried to find fingerprints on the phone, but it was quite a challenge. A public phone could have many fingerprints. Furthermore, investigators realized that the criminal could have wiped the phone after making the call or used gloves. Experts concluded that Jessica was killed elsewhere and her body was moved to the water pump station. Marks on the ground in front of the pump station suggested that the killer could have dragged Jessica's body from a car and dragged it across the ground. Jessica's clothes were intact except for one shoe. Police could not find it in her pocket or in the surrounding area. The only clue found at the crime scene was tire marks on the ground. Police could not be sure that they belonged to the killer's car, but they took pictures of them. Medical experts performed an autopsy and determined that Jessica died from strangulation based on marks on her face and neck. It appeared that the killer did it with his bare hands. A hamburger was also found in her stomach, consumed less than an hour before her death. Her mother said she had not given Jessica anything of the sort that day, leading police to believe the food had been provided to her by the killer. Experts also found no signs of sexual assault, leaving the killer's motive unclear. Police initially suspected Jessica's parents because neither had a solid alibi for the time of her disappearance. Jessica's mother claimed that she was packing her belongings in the apartment while her father went shopping. However, both had the opportunity to commit the crime, theoretically. Police were trying to figure out how the killer had taken Jessica out of the complex's courtyard without anyone noticing or without her calling for help. This led them to suspect that the killer may have known the victim and that she had left voluntarily. Another factor that supported this theory was the killer's tone during the 911 call. Although experts tried to erase the recording, they still noticed sadness and regret in the killer's voice, as if he truly regretted his actions. The killer's actions when calling 911 spoke volumes. It is possible that the killer did this for the thrill of toying with the police and manipulating the investigation, or that he truly regretted his actions and wanted to somehow alleviate that feeling. However, upon closer examination, investigators are inclined to the second option: that the killer truly regretted his actions. The police checked Jessica's father's car and found an important detail in the trunk. It was a roll of black garbage bags similar to the one in which the victim's body was found. However, after analysis, experts determined that this bag was not similar to the other bags in the father's car. Therefore, Jessica's father was eliminated as a suspect and investigators turned their attention to other people. Forensic experts studied the victim's clothes and body for clues. They found several important traces. There was a large amount of dog hair on the victim's body, which was very strange because Jessica's family did not own dogs. This suggested that the dog might belong to the killer. They also found human hair on the girl's body, which belonged to an unidentified white male. However, it took experts a few days to extract the man's DNA profile. 2 types of strange fibers were also found on the victim's clothing. After analysis, experts concluded that one type of fiber could have come from the car seat cover and the other from the carpet. This further supported the theory that the victim had been killed elsewhere and taken to the water station by car. Experts attempted to identify the breed of the dog from the hairs on Jessica's clothing using an FBI database. This database contains microscopic photographs of hairs from many different dog breeds and has proven useful in criminal cases. The process of identifying the breed of the dog is done by comparing the hairs to samples from the database and eliminating each breed one by one. They eventually concluded that the hair on the victim's clothes came from a Shar-Pei. This suggested that the killer may have owned such a dog and that the hair had gotten on Jessica's clothes while she was in the killer's car or at their home. Investigators developed a preliminary theory that the killer may have lured Jessica into his car, taken her to McDonald's for a hamburger, then taken her home and killed her. Meanwhile, experts were also trying to improve the phone call recording. However, this was a challenging task. To solve this problem, detectives sought help from NASA. NASA has advanced tools for improving recordings, originally designed to improve recordings from space. They agreed to help and provided the police with a higher quality recording. Experts needed a voice sample from the suspect to compare with the call recording and determine a match. Because detectives suspected that the killer might know Jessica, they decided to play the recording of the call to her mother. Jessica's mother listened to the recording and said that the voice sounded familiar, but she couldn't remember who it belonged to. However, after listening to the recording a second time, Jessica's mother recognized the voice as that of a neighbor who lived in the same complex. She added information to detectives that the man often walked a Shar-Pei in the yard. Police quickly identified the man as James Crow, 35. During the initial investigation, investigators interviewed him along with other neighbors. He said that he saw Jessica in the yard while walking her dog. They talked for a while, and then he left. Detectives looked into his background and discovered that James had no criminal record. He lives with his wife, a nurse, and is currently unemployed, spending most of his time walking the streets with a Shar-Pei named Pumpkin. The detectives realized that James's voice and the fact that he owned a dog of the same breed were not enough to arrest him. So they obtained a search warrant for his car. During the search, they discovered two troubling clues. Under the front passenger seat, they found an empty Happy Meal bag, which was suspicious since Jessica had eaten a hamburger. Experts also noticed that his car had brand new tires, as if they had barely been used. The police discovered that James had replaced the tires on the day of Jessica's murder, even though his previous tires were not very old and could have lasted for several more years. James claimed to have left the old tires at a car repair shop, which was unusual since they were not old at all. The police went to the service center to investigate. When they arrived, only one of James's tires was left. They compared its tread pattern to those found near the body. However, the results showed that they did not match. Detectives were not 100% certain that the tire tracks on the ground were left by the killer's car, as it was possible that the tire tracks were from a maintenance vehicle that regularly visited the area. Police searched James's apartment and found a box containing rolls of trash bags that matched the bags found on the victim's body. Although not direct evidence, detectives decided to investigate whether there was any way to determine if the bags collected at the scene and at James's home came from the same manufacturer. However, identifying these bags was difficult because they had no distinct markings, and there were hundreds of similar manufacturers. To address this challenge, detectives contacted Roberts, who was in charge of quality control at a bag manufacturing company. Roberts was able to identify the factory that produced the bags found in James's apartment through the code on the cardboard box containing the rolls. This product was manufactured at a facility in Virginia. Experts discovered that small amounts of iron or titanium were present in the bag's composition depending on their color. Since the materials are constantly changing during the manufacturing process, the ratio of plastic to iron or titanium actually changes daily. Detectives decided to take bags from James's apartment and the crime scene to measure the ratio of elements in the plastic using high-intensity X-rays. This gave them a very accurate ratio. Careful analysis showed that the ratio of iron to titanium in both plastic bags was the same, which suggested that they were manufactured on the same day and even in the same batch. The process of manufacturing garbage bags often leaves a small amount of microscopic debris on the machine, which is normal. However, when the plastic sheets are cut into bags, this debris forms small streaks that can be seen with the naked eye. Each roll of bags will have a unique pattern made up of these streaks. The pattern on each bag was created by particles of debris moving down the conveyor belt, which were then replaced by new particles. As a result, the same pattern would be retained over several hundred feet of fabric. This suggests that the two bags were not only produced in the same batch but also within a few hours of each other. When comparing the bags from the suspect's apartment in the crime scene, experts found that the lines on them matched remarkably well. Furthermore, after production, the bags were rolled into a bundle by a machine, but the machine often did this unevenly. Without close observation, these deviations were barely noticeable, making the rolls appear smooth. When examining the edges of the bags, there were small folds and wrinkles that formed a unique pattern similar to streaks. Experts compared and found that the pattern on the bags from James's apartment matched exactly the pattern on the bags at the crime scene. This meant that with a high probability, the bag from the crime scene had been taken from James' apartment. In addition, forensic analysts compared fibers found on Jessica's clothing with those from the carpet in James' apartment and the seat cover of his car. The results showed that both samples matched. Furthermore, an audio expert compared the recording of the 911 call with James' voice sample and concluded that they matched. Although the experts had collected a significant amount of evidence, the detectives still faced the major problem that all the evidence collected was circumstantial. However, the police were confident of James's involvement in Jessica's murder and decided to arrest him. Since James continued to deny his guilt, the case went to trial. The prosecution presented their report on how the crime occurred. James spent a lot of time outside with his dog, and all the local kids knew him well. They often played with Pumpkin, James' dog, and therefore, they trusted him. Jessica was no exception, and this trust may have led to her becoming a victim. The police provided an explanation of what happened on the day Jessica went missing. At that time, James was walking his dog and saw her sitting alone on a bench. He approached her, started chatting, and then invited her to McDonald's to buy her a hamburger. Jessica knew James quite well, so she agreed. According to the police, on that day, James noticed Jessica sitting alone on a bench while he was walking his dog and started chatting with her. He offered to take her to McDonald's, promising to buy her a hamburger, and Jessica agreed because she knew him well. After eating at the restaurant, he may have taken her back to the apartment complex and invited her to his home. He may have asked her to play with Pumpkin. The presence of carpet fibers from his living room on Jessica's clothes suggests she was there on the day of her death. According to the investigation, James may have intended to attack Jessica, but something went wrong. Based on the autopsy results, the perpetrator not only strangled her with his bare hands but also pressed his palms against her face. This may be evidence that she tried to scream, causing the perpetrator to panic and attack. After Jessica's death, James placed her body in a garbage bag and put it in his car to transport it to a disposal site without arousing suspicion. James drove a few miles to a nearby water station, where he left Jessica's body. He then returned to his house, perhaps after stopping at a gas station to make a phone call. During the preliminary hearing, James' attorneys attempted to dismiss all available evidence, arguing that there was no solid evidence to prove their client's guilt. However, in capital cases, the standard of proof is much higher. In James's case, he had a very good chance of avoiding the death penalty. Based on these facts, a plea deal was proposed to James. Under the deal, James would admit to second-degree murder and receive a 40-year prison sentence without the possibility of parole, thereby avoiding the death penalty. In the summer of 1998, 2 years after the murder, James agreed to the deal. Although he was not required to disclose details of the crime, James mentioned that part of his decision was to spare Jessica's family the long ordeal of a trial. The prosecution believed James had shown remorse, as demonstrated by his 911 call. However, the purpose of this call remains unclear. The only plausible explanation is that James genuinely wanted to reduce his guilt for such a serious crime. Jessica's parents were unhappy with the deal because they wanted their daughter's killer to receive the death penalty. They were also disappointed that James refused to confess to the crime. What was even more disappointing was that James did not serve his entire prison sentence due to poor health. He died in November 2011 at the age of 49, taking the secret of Jessica's murder with him. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rebecca Gould. Rebecca Gould was born on April 28, 1982, in the small town of Melbourne, Kansas, USA, to parents who were going through a divorce. Rebecca, along with her 3 sisters, was raised by her mother but still maintained a relationship with her father. The Gould sisters have a close relationship. They shared a difficult childhood which brought them closer together. Of the sisters, Rebecca and her youngest sister, Danielle, are the closest. In search of a better life and the opportunity to pursue a university education, Rebecca decided to leave her hometown and move to Fayetteville, Arkansas. There, she enrolled in a community college and worked part-time. Danielle also moved to Fayetteville to live with her sister. She helped Rebecca take care of the family and pursue her dream of earning a university degree. One day, during a trip back to her hometown, Rebecca met Casey, whom she noticed and felt something different about. They started dating and gradually fell in love. Although they lived far apart, she and Casey shared beautiful moments together. The relationship between Rebecca and Casey grew stronger. On the morning of September 20th, 2004, Rebecca was scheduled to go to Melbourne to pick Casey up from work at a fast food restaurant. After buying coffee and sandwiches, she decided to go back to the mobile home and take a nap before returning to Fayetteville. Meanwhile, Danielle was at Casey's house waiting for Rebecca to pick her up. Rebecca and Danielle had planned for Rebecca to pick Danielle up at noon. However, Danielle tried calling and texting Rebecca but was unable to reach her sister. Danielle then decided to call Rebecca's friends but still did not receive any news. Danielle became increasingly worried. Danielle decided to go to the police station to report Rebecca missing. The police began investigating Rebecca's disappearance by questioning potential witnesses. The first person they chose to question was Casey, the last person to see Rebecca alive. The detectives went to the restaurant where Casey worked and asked him about Rebecca. Casey said that he had slept over at a friend's house and went straight to work the next morning without seeing Rebecca as usual. He assumed Rebecca had left town with Danielle some time ago. Even though Casey had an alibi, the police still felt suspicious of him. They found it strange that he had left his dog alone at home to spend the night at a friend's house. Furthermore, why would he decide to sleep over at a friend's house the night before his girlfriend left? This was one inconsistency in Casey's story that the police noticed. The police thoroughly searched the mobile home where Casey lived and where Rebecca was last seen. They detected a lingering smell of bleach, apparently used to cover up some sort of incident. Rebecca's belongings were still in place, but the bed was in disarray, and the sheets were rumpled. One of them showed blood stains. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood was Rebecca's. Casey immediately became a suspect. However, he had a solid alibi. Several witnesses had seen Rebecca personally driving him to work on Monday morning, and from 8:30 to 4:30, Casey was consistently present at the restaurant. The investigation hit a dead end until a call from a passerby. A week later, a passerby discovered the body of a young girl, brutally mutilated and dumped at the bottom of a shallow ravine outside the city. Police searched the area thoroughly for traces and physical evidence. It was not difficult to identify the murdered girl as Rebecca Gould. She was wearing the same t-shirt and underwear she had been last seen in alive. An autopsy later revealed that her death had occurred about 7 days earlier, on the same Monday, September 20th, when Casey had spent the night at a friend's house. Investigators found signs of brutal beatings on Rebecca's body, including multiple bruises, a broken nose, and a fractured skull. Of particular note were 2 blunt force injuries to the head. These were clearly fatal. The shape of these injuries matched the shape of the missing leg from the piano in Casey's mobile home. Police believed it could have been used as a murder weapon, but they were unable to find it. The details of Rebecca's autopsy revealed the horrific brutality of her killer. In addition to the injuries to her head and neck, she also showed signs of strangulation. A broken hyoid bone indicated a prolonged and brutal strangulation. At the same time, there were no signs of resistance or self-defense, which suggested that the attacker may have been someone she knew and who attacked her from behind. The lack of signs of sexual violence also suggested that rape was not the motive for the murder. Detectives continued to investigate Casey, Rebecca's boyfriend. Several witnesses recalled that Rebecca had talked about wanting to break up with Casey because she was fed up with his constant arguments and controlling behavior. Casey's excessive possessiveness became apparent, especially after Rebecca moved to another city to study. However, Casey's alibi forced the police to look for other leads and suspects. Over time, numerous people connected to Rebecca were investigated, but to no avail. The murder of Rebecca Gould went cold. But in the late 2010s, a surprising breakthrough occurred. A podcast series dedicated to Rebecca's murder caught the attention of a man who claimed to have valuable information about the case. The anonymous witness spoke of a confession he had heard, in which he said he had worked with Casey, the victim's boyfriend, years earlier. At one point, after a few drinks, Casey blurted out that he had killed Rebecca. The witness said that Casey confessed to the crime when he was drunk. However, what was suspicious was that the witness had remained silent for many years and only spoke up when his relationship with Casey became strained. Investigators initially viewed the witness's testimony with skepticism. They suspected that the man's testimony was just a way to get revenge and frame Casey. However, they could not dismiss the testimony either. They decided to continue investigating and look for more evidence. After more than a month of investigation, the detectives still had not found enough evidence to charge Casey. However, they felt that the solution was somewhere nearby. They decided to focus on people related to Casey. Particular attention was paid to William Miller, Casey's cousin, who had arrived in town before the murders. At first, William seemed like a minor character, but as the detectives reconstructed the events, his role in the case began to become clearer. William had left the United States after the murder and moved to the Philippines. This made the detectives suspicious. However, since the Philippines did not have an extradition treaty with the United States, interrogating William became impossible. The detectives could only hope that William would return to the United States and come to their attention. Meanwhile, they found some information on social media. William had joined a discussion group about the case and started commenting on posts. He described the area where the mutilated body was found with surprising accuracy. William's behavior raised suspicions. The detectives felt that they were getting closer to solving the case, but they still needed to find more evidence to be able to charge William. Why would someone who had lived on the other side of the world for years suddenly become so absorbed in the details of a tragedy that happened so long ago? Moreover, William's accurate description of the details of the case is almost astonishing. William Miller found his way back to the United States 16 years after Rebecca Gould's disappearance. Investigators finally had the opportunity to ask him some important questions. The police had previously tried to contact him because of a tip from the community. They suspected that he might have a connection to Rebecca. Investigators began by asking him about his life, especially his time in the Philippines. William made no secret of the fact that he was wealthy. He owned a spacious farm with a family and animals. During the conversation, he also talked about his relationship with Casey. He denied seeing Casey the night before Rebecca disappeared, but he also accidentally revealed that he witnessed an argument between Casey and Rebecca. Investigators felt that he had important information that he could not share because of legal restrictions. William reluctantly added that he never saw Rebecca again, dead or alive. This statement became an important clue for the police, as they realized that information about Rebecca's death had not been made public, making William's knowledge suspicious. Investigators decided to employ a trick to test William. They brought photos of William's car taken in 2004 into the interrogation room and claimed that there was blood on the gas pedal, matching Rebecca Gould's. Upon hearing this, William became nervous and began to fumble his testimony. He gave several implausible versions of events, including seeing a stranger in a white van near Casey's mobile home and accidentally witnessing a robbery. These bizarre stories only reinforced the impression that William had something to hide. Finally, William announced he was ready to tell the whole truth. He recounted that on the morning of September 20th, 2004, he had gone hunting and stopped by Casey's mobile home to borrow a cell phone. Rebecca, who was inside, sensed no danger and opened the door for William. William suddenly lunged at Rebecca, knocking her to the ground and began beating her with his fists and random objects. He took a broken piano leg and repeatedly struck the defenseless Rebecca over the head. To ensure she was dead, William strangled her with a pair of tights he found in the room. After killing Rebecca, William wrapped her body in a suitcase, mopped the bloody floor, stuffed the blankets and sheets in the washing machine, and turned the mattress upside down to hide the evidence. He took Rebecca's body out of town and threw it into the nearest ravine. Investigators listening to this bizarre confession were haunted by a simple question: why? What drove this seemingly respectable family man to commit such a terrible crime? William swore he had no intention of raping Rebecca and that there was no romantic or sexual relationship between them. He had not robbed her and had no personal grievances or grudges. The reason, he said, was a spontaneous rage at the weakness he sensed in Rebecca. Rebecca had not said anything offensive or done anything wrong. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. For years, William Miller had boasted about his crimes and taunted the police. Joining the online group became a gain for him, a chance to prove his superiority over the law once again. However, was Rebecca Gould Williams' only victim? This became the central question for the detectives. In order to find out more information, they resorted to a ruse. They thought this could help them discover the truth. When they told William that they knew of other murders with a method similar to Rebecca's, William began to cry and beg for mercy. He then revealed a series of new details about his crimes, which horrified the detectives. According to William, he was not just a lone killer but a true maniac. At least 5 lives were lost at his hands. The victims were mostly young women, including prostitutes and hitchhikers. William would pick them up on the highway, lure them to deserted places, and then brutally murder them. William did not rape these women. Instead, he derived pleasure from the killing process itself. He watched the life fade from the eyes of his captives, savoring their terror and despair. Then, he would strangle them with their clothes. The detectives listened attentively to William's confession, feeling horrified. They realized that they had encountered a living serial killer, which could help them solve many cases. However, the detectives also questioned the authenticity of William's confession. To verify the information, they asked William to provide more details about the victims and where they were buried. William provided some information, but it was not detailed enough. He gave some descriptions of the victims, but did not provide specific information about the locations or dates of the murders. In the end, the detectives relied on a rough map that William had marked with some of the possible locations where the victims' remains might be found. William's testimony was still valuable. The detectives knew that they had months, if not years, of hard work and careful examination ahead. They would have to search for missing bodies, compare DNA, and identify the victims. The most important thing was that William would eventually go to prison and never be able to hurt anyone again. William had revealed too many details that only the killer would know. His testimony matched the autopsy results and the circumstances of the crime scene perfectly. In November 2022, more than 5 years after William Miller was arrested, the case finally came to a close. William was charged with the premeditated murder of Rebecca Gould. However, investigators did not have enough evidence to charge him with other crimes. The court decided to focus on the 16-year-old murder case. The prosecutor argued that a life sentence was appropriate for William. They believed that he was no longer a human being but a killer who posed a direct threat to society. The prosecutor believed that if William were released, even for a day, he would surely commit more crimes. In contrast to the prosecutor, William's lawyers emphasized that he was not responsible for his actions because of his mental illness. They urged the jury to sympathize with their client and allow him to be treated in an appropriate psychiatric facility. In the end, the court convicted William Miller of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 25 years. If William were released, he would be 72 years old. The verdict shocked the people of Melbourne. Many protested that the sentence was too lenient. In their view, a person who committed such a crime did not deserve parole. Some argued that the investigation had watered down the crime and weakened the case to avoid affecting the clearance rate. Ultimately, William's conviction automatically cleared Casey, who many townspeople considered the real killer. Despite the skepticism and outrage, the fact remains that one of the most famous and mysterious murders in Melbourne's history has finally been solved. The real killer, a serial killer and psychopath, was imprisoned, not for life, but long enough to protect society from further victims. While not all the mysteries were solved, Rebecca's family finally knew the truth. They could begin to heal their emotional wounds. Months have passed since William Miller's arrest, and life in Melbourne is slowly returning to normal. Rebecca Gould's family is trying to come to terms with their grief. Her mother has found the strength to visit her daughter's grave for the first time in years. Her father has also opened her childhood toys and photo albums, which have been hidden in the attic for a long time. Rebecca's sisters have grown up and are trying to make up for lost time, calling each other regularly to share their grief. Rebecca's best friend, Casey, has decided to stay in Melbourne. He feels he must prove that he can build a new life despite the pain and loss he has experienced. He rarely visits the old mobile home, which holds so many painful memories. But when he gets the chance, he brings white roses to the door, Rebecca's favorite flower. William Miller, who caused pain to Rebecca's family, seems to have accepted his fate in prison. He behaves quietly, trying not to attract undue attention. He willingly communicates with a psychiatrist and takes prescribed medication. However, from time to time, a strange smile flashes across his face, as if reflecting something dark that has long been hidden under a mask of kindness. This story is a testament to the inevitability of justice. Sometimes it seems that evil is winning and criminals are getting away with it, but in reality, it is not. Sooner or later, punishment comes to all those who have crossed the line of humanity, and when it does, there is no turning back, only bitterness, loneliness, and the burden of guilt to carry to the end. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Valerie Reyes. Valerie Reyes is a 24-year-old girl. She grew up in a loving family in the suburbs of New York. Valerie has 3 younger brothers. Valerie is cheerful, sociable, and friendly. Valerie is very close to her mother. The two share their private secrets and often discuss everything like two best friends. Valerie has many different talents, including drawing and singing. However, her true passion is to become a professional tattoo artist. With the guidance of her brother, who has experience in this field, Valerie learned and developed her skills. She dreams of opening a tattoo shop with her brother, where they can turn their creative ideas into reality. During this time, Valerie works part-time at a small, cozy bookstore. Valerie's life took a major turn in January 2018. That's when she met Javier da Silva, a 26-year-old Venezuelan man who had just moved to New York on a popular dating site. Javier told a touching story about how he had to flee his country in crisis to save his life. Because of this, he was unable to complete his university studies. Currently, Javier is working hard in a restaurant to build a new life in a foreign country. Valerie felt sympathy for him and they started a romantic relationship after a few dates. However, the relationship developed too quickly and only lasted about 3 months. Javier mentioned marriage, which scared Valerie because she was not ready. After feeling that everything was moving too fast, Valerie decided to end the relationship. Javier initially made a good impression on Valerie's family because he seemed to care about her and wanted the best for her. However, when Valerie expressed her desire to break up, Javier's behavior changed. He refused to accept the end of the relationship. He sent dozens of messages a day, begging Valerie to continue the relationship. In September 2018, Javier called Valerie. He said he had used her bank card to pay for an online purchase and wanted to meet Valerie to return the money. Valerie immediately sensed something was wrong and suspected that it was just an excuse to meet. Valerie then confided in a friend and asked the friend to talk to Javier so that he would stop bothering her. After the conversation, Javier stopped calling and texting. Valerie felt relieved and could finally return to her normal life with small joys and exciting plans for the future. However, Valerie did not know that the worst was yet to come. On January 24, 2019, Javier, whom Valerie had broken up with long ago and had not kept in touch with, wrote to an acquaintance of Valerie. In the letter, Javier claimed that he had caught Valerie in bed with another man. This information surprised and angered Valerie because she knew it was not true. January 27th, after her shift at the bookstore, Valerie returned home and called her mother Ana Reyes in a state of panic. She cried and screamed into the phone that someone wanted to kill her. Valerie had been worried for days and felt that someone was following her. Valerie was so distressed that she could only cry into. After a while of talking to her mother, Valerie seemed to feel a little better. Before going to bed, Valerie texted her mother that she had calmed down and was ready to go to bed. Valerie's family became worried when she did not show up for dinner on January 29th. They kept calling her, but did not receive any answer. This made the family feel scared and uneasy. After waiting for a long time, the family decided to seek help from the police. On January 30th, they went to the police and filed a missing persons report for Valerie. The police immediately began investigating the case and began searching Valerie's apartment, but found no significant clues. There were no signs of a struggle or kidnapping. There were only small blood stains on the pillowcase in the bathroom, but the police thought it could be a simple injury. The police decided to look for Valerie and contacted her mobile operator. They discovered that Valerie's phone had been switched to airplane mode on the night of January 28th at around 3 a.m. Since then, the phone had not been turned on. This made the police and Valerie's family even more worried. But the most alarming fact was that someone had accessed Valerie's cloud storage and carefully studied all her photos, videos, and messages. Another worrying detail was that at 5 a.m. on January 29th, just 2 hours after the phone was turned off, someone had withdrawn $1,000 from Valerie's bank account. Surveillance cameras captured a man driving a black Honda to the ATM, quickly taking the money and disappearing. When the license plate was checked, police quickly determined that the car belonged to Javier, Valerie's ex-boyfriend. He was immediately placed on the list of prime suspects. During a search of Javier's home, no evidence was found relating to Valerie's disappearance. However, surveillance camera footage showed that on the evening of January 28, Javier left the house in a black Honda and went to Valerie's residence. Police checked Valerie's phone and found that there had been no calls or messages from Javier in recent months. This indicated that Valerie had not invited Javier to visit or meet. After Valerie went missing, Javier turned off his phone, so his movements could not be tracked. However, at 6 a.m., his cell phone briefly became active near Harrison, Connecticut. At 7:30 a.m., the phone was found in Greenwich. Javier returned home to Queens at 9:43 a.m., as confirmed by nearby cameras. Police later found that Javier had posted an old photo of them on Instagram the night before Valerie went missing. His posting of this photo could have been to let people know that they were still together, or it could have been some kind of secret sign. While the police were investigating Valerie's disappearance, Valerie's family and friends continued to search for her. They posted flyers with Valerie's picture and checked all of Valerie's usual haunts. A week passed in anxiety, with sleepless nights and exhausting searches. But still no results. On February 5th, highway workers saw a red suitcase on the side of the road. When they opened the suitcase, They saw a horrifying scene. Inside the suitcase was the body of a young woman. Her hands and feet were tied tightly with rope, her mouth was sealed with a thick layer of tape. Her thin shirt was torn, her jeans were torn and dirty. The girl was not wearing shoes. People noticed a terrible wound on her head. They immediately called the police to report the incident. The police arrived at the scene. Through tests, they quickly identified the victim as Valerie Reyes. Valerie's parents received news about their daughter. During the autopsy, the gruesome details of the murder were revealed. Before her death, Valerie had been severely beaten in the head with a blunt object, and then, while still alive, she had been stuffed into a suitcase and left to die. The evidence that Javier Dilva was involved in the murder was that Valerie's bank card was found in his wallet. During questioning, Javier gave a surprising explanation. Javier claimed that he had found Valerie's bank card and ID card at the bar. The police presented all the evidence they had gathered, including surveillance camera footage, details of his car, and the movements of his phone on the night of the incident. The police told Javier that they knew he was at Valerie's house on the night of the incident. Javier later changed his story. Javier admitted that he had been drinking too much that night and might have been at Valerie's house, but he didn't know everything. When the police showed him a photo of Valerie's body in a suitcase, Javier was shocked and cried. JV tried to justify his actions. According to his account, Javier went to Valerie's house that night after she invited him. They had sex, but during sex, Valerie collapsed to the floor and lost consciousness. Javier claimed that he wanted to help Valerie and performed CPR and cardiac massage on her, but all were unsuccessful. To avoid being charged with murder, he tried to hide the evidence of the crime. However, when the police asked why Valerie's body was found bound and gagged, Javier was unable to answer. When police later asked about Valerie's bank card, Javier stated that he had withdrawn another $4,350 from Valerie's account. During a search of Javier's home, Valerie's phone and laptop, which he had taken, were also found. Javier finally collapsed after a thorough examination of Valerie's body. There were signs of struggle and violence on her body. Under Valerie's fingernails, Javier's skin and blood were found. Javier's DNA was everywhere on the suitcase, in the car interior, on Valerie's belongings. Javier was immediately arrested and formally charged with the murder of Valerie Reyes. Under the pressure of irrefutable evidence, Javier da Silva finally fully admitted his guilt in court. On February 5, 2020, a hearing was held in the case of 24-year-old Valerie Reyes. Javier's lawyer tried to defend his actions, arguing that it was the result of a violent and jealous outburst, depression after the breakup with Valerie, and drug use. On September 3, 2021, the court affirmed that 28-year-old Javier da Silva was sentenced to 30 years in prison. This means that he will spend most of his life behind bars. The investigation also found that Javier had been living in the United States illegally. He arrived in the country on May 8, 2017, and his 90-day stay expired on August 5, 2017. Therefore, after serving his 30-year prison sentence, he will be immediately deported to his native Venezuela.